Welcome to Classic Trials. If you're new here, my name is Alita. I'm a lawyer licensed in California and DC, and on this channel, we make sense of the law one bite at a time. In this series, we observe and analyze the play-by-play of some of the biggest trials that have shaped the public consciousness of the American judicial system. In this season, we're working our way through the case of California v. Erik and Lyle Menendez. Growing up in Princeton, New Jersey, and then Beverly Hills, California, these young men had everything they could ever want, or so it seemed, until one night on August 20th, 1989, they approached Jose and Kitty Menendez with newly purchased shotguns. Put on trial for murdering their own parents, they claimed self-defense, arguing they were terrorized in their own home by abusive parents until they could take no more. Which argument is more convincing? Come join and see for yourself. Hello. Welcome, everybody. I know I'm so sorry that we are starting a little bit late today. Full disclosure, I had turned off my computer entirely to give it a rest so that I didn't have the same audio, video kind of discrepancies that I've had in recent weeks. Because I think that is actually the problem when that happens is I just need to give my computer a rest. Anyway, so I did that and then didn't calculate how much time I needed to like get everything ready all over again for the live stream. So I am very sorry for starting a little bit late. Maybe there are some other folks that are running late that are just, fine with it. So anyway, so we've got of course with us as always, we have Miss Indy Bear, the pupper who is being a little snoozy bear right now. And then of course Holmes right here. He's a little bit off camera, but he'll probably see you guys, or you guys will probably see him soon enough because he's just hanging out ready for a treat as always. So okay, I think that's everything. So last week we heard from, of course, obviously more witnesses. The last one that we heard from was their Aunt Terry, Teresita Baralt. I always want to pronounce it like I'm saying. There's a Lithuanian version of that name. It's very, very close to it. It's Teresita. And so I always, like, my brain wants to say it that way every time I see her name or think of her name. So anyway, so if I sound a little funny saying it, it's probably because I end up somewhere in the middle between the two. So anyway, so she was the last one to testify last week in episode 29, which, can you guys believe that we are on episode 30 now? Like, we have done this. This is our 30th time sitting down to watch this trial and to continue on through it. It's pretty cool. It's a very long trial, but it's been quite a ride. With that aside, so today we're gonna continue with her testimony. So we didn't get to finish yesterday because they took a break on her testimony in between one day and another. So today we're gonna pick up again with her. Then we also have another family member that we have not yet heard from, who is Peter Cano, Marta Cano's ex-husband, an uncle to Erik and Lyle. So this is an uncle by former marriage, really. And then after that, we're going to hear from a couple more teachers, Erik's teachers in particular. So one of them is, if I can move the kitty cat, Janet, he's laying on my notes. Janet Stoltzfus. She was a teacher at Princeton Day School, and she was Erik's 9th grade Bible study class teacher. Then we're going to hear from Dr. Barbara Zussman. Yes. Sorry, I had to move his paw. Dr. Barbara Zussman, who is a teacher at the time that she's testifying and at the time that she knew Erik Menendez that she's testifying over, she was a teacher at Beverly Hills High School. So when he was there as a 12th grader, so she taught him his 12th grade English class. So we'll be hearing more family stuff, more school stuff. Probably, I would expect that this is going to be more stuff about how Erik Menendez struggled in school and didn't get the help that he needed in order to academically succeed, and that caused a lot of stress and trauma and just bad experience all the way around, to say the least. So that's who we're going to hear from in this portion of like this video snippet on court TV, there is one more witness. We're going to cut it off before we get to him because he's going to continue on in the next day. So I would rather have one witness all on one day. So it's still going to be plenty of time today to watch trial stream. So it's not going to be a short day by any means. So, okay, with that, I guess we should probably get into it, shouldn't we? All right, let's get started. Oh, whoa, hang on, pressed the wrong button. Almost left the studio. That would have been bad. Okay. All right, let's get to it.
Both juries.
Oh, and by the way, there's like, we're skipping over like 25, 26 minutes of back and forth on like admin stuff, hearing stuff, argument back and forth. So we're cutting right into the testimony as we typically do through this series. Sometimes we do show some argument back and forth on some of the testimony. But on this one, we're skipping right through it. All right. We're getting right back into their Aunt Terry, Teresita Baralt. And as always, I am also going to be pinning a chat on like who's testifying. So if anybody ever has any question throughout, you just look at the pinned chat, the most recent pinned chat, and you'll be able to see exactly who's testifying. And also all of them are listed in the description below. Okay. All right. That's all. Oh, and sorry, I keep thinking of more things. And I've said this before, but if you guys are not able to watch the whole thing, you want a little bit of a recap, or next week before we start, the next bit of testimony, if you want to go back and take a look at what we've done so far, I've been doing weekly recaps as well over on Instagram. So you can go to my Instagram account, check out the latest reels there. I've got new recaps ever since. I need to figure out when I started. Maybe it was like episode 15 or something. I can't remember when I started doing weekly recaps. But yeah. Okay. Anyway, let's get to it finally, right?
Present, as well as all the other participants in the trial. Good morning to all the jurors. Welcome back. And we're resuming the cross-examination of the witness who is on the witness stand. Would you state your name again for us, please?
Teresita Baralt.
All right. I'll remind you that you're still under oath.
Yes, sir.
All right. You may continue your cross-examination.
Yes.
I remember yesterday you were asked questions on direct examination about Lyle Menendez's spending habits both before and after his parents' death. Do you remember that testimony?
Yes, I do.
And I believe you indicated that he always spent a lot of money both before and after.
Yes.
Did he spend more money afterwards than he had previously spent?
Yes.
As a matter of fact, did you disapprove of the amount of money that he spent after his parents' death?
I was very worried. Okay. I was very worried, but I was worried about a lot of things about the children. They were in pain, which was normal.
Okay, but yesterday when you characterized the spending
Yes.
as being a lot before and a lot after, did you mean to imply that it was equivalent or it was the same?
Well, no, he had more after.
He had more money afterwards.
Yes.
And he spent a lot of money.
Yes.
Okay.
Lyle didn't have much regard for money. I mean, money didn't mean much to Lyle.
But he bought things after his parents' death. He bought things, correct?
Yes, and he bought before too.
But the things that he bought after his parents' deaths were of a greater, he bought a lot more expensive.
He had more money.
And he bought a lot of expensive things, didn't he?
Yes.
Things he couldn't have purchased before his parents' death.
Overall.
He bought the kinds of things after his parents' death that he couldn't have purchased before.
Probably because he had more money.
After the deaths.
Yes.
Now, directing your attention to 1987 through 89, let me ask you this.
Okay.
When your brother and his family moved to California,
Yes.
How often did you see them per year?
Okay.
I'm going to check the question later on the first 4 months.
Sustain.
All right. How often did you see the family all together?
Okay. They moved in August, September. They came at least 3 times before Thanksgiving. They came in Thanksgiving, and they spent Christmas with us.
And that was in 1986.
And that was in 1986.
How about the year 1987?
Okay, my father died in 87, so they came for a long time there. At that time, Lyle was in Australia on a tennis tournament. Erik came with them.
So it was Erik Menendez, your brother, and your sister-in-law.
Who came for the funeral, and they stayed like 2 weeks. Okay, I saw them again. You're talking 87. Let me think. That was also a year of a lot of pain for me, so that's a little blurry on exact times.
Did you see them at Christmas of 87, if you recall?
I think we saw. I don't want to say yes if it's. I'm not sure. I'm not completely sure if Christmas of 80. I know I didn't see them on 88.
You did.
I don't think I saw them at Christmas per se of 87. I did see them on 86.
Did you see them at Christmas of 1988?
No.
All right.
No.
And so in the fall of 1987, Lyle Menendez had started at Princeton University. Is that correct?
Yes.
And were you ever in his company when his father or mother came to visit?
Yes.
And I believe you indicated they came on several occasions while he was at Princeton. Is that correct?
Yes, they did. Jose had a lot of trips into New York, and he always made a point of coming to Princeton to see Lyle, even if it was only an overnight visit for whatever.
And on occasion, he brought his wife with him. Is that correct?
Kitty traveled with him very frequently.
And that's during this time period that we're talking about of 87 through 89?
Yes.
So in the fall of 1987, Lyle Menendez was a freshman at Princeton University, and then in the spring of 1988, he was asked to leave. Is that correct? For a year?
I think he was asked to leave, I believe, in January.
All right. I mischaracterized January, spring, but it was January of 88.
Yes.
And how did you know that he'd been asked to leave the
Yes.
university?
Yes.
Did he tell you?
Well, he told me, Jose told me. It was, like I told you yesterday, this happened in my house, so I was perfectly aware of what was going on.
Okay, so Lyle Menendez came to you one day in late 1987 and told you that he had some problems at school. Is that correct?
Yes.
What did he tell you? 12:20.
All right, it's not received for the truth of the matter stated, just to reflect the state of mind of the individual making the statement.
What did Lyle Menendez tell you?
I don't think Lyle, okay, Lyle didn't think he had cheated. He had permission from the teacher's assistant to go and get the notes from his lab partner.
So was that
And he did.
Okay, so there was so did Lyle tell you that he had been accused of cheating?
Oh, yeah.
All right. And did you do something, either you or your husband do something the same day that Lyle gave you this information?
Yes, we told him, I said, Lyle, I think this is serious matter. He said, Terry, I didn't cheat. I said, well, they're accusing you. You have to take it seriously. And so he said, I think you should call your parents and inform them of this. He said, but I didn't cheat. I said, but you're accused of it. And that's when we picked up the phone. My husband talked to Jose. I said, I think Lyle has a problem. So talked about it and put Lyle on the phone, and he explained to his parents exactly what he had explained to me.
Shortly thereafter, did Mr. Menendez then come to the Princeton area?
Yes.
Within how many days of this phone call did he?
I don't remember exactly. I think that I think he came when there was supposed to be a hearing on in front of the Honor Code Society. I don't know. Princeton has their own little formal thing, and he came over for that, and he talked to the dean.
Now, when your brother came to see his son, did they ever have any meetings at your house before this academic committee met? In other words, did you ever see Jose Menendez with his son discussing this incident?
Yes, I did.
Was he angry with his son? or did he appear to be angry?
Jose wasn't angry. Jose blamed the university for it.
Of course he did.
All right.
He
And
didn't think,
so he didn't express anger towards his son.
That sounds about on brand based on what we've heard from other teachers during parent-teacher conferences and whatnot. If Erik is struggling or Lyle is struggling, it's not Erik or Lyle's fault. It is most definitely not Kitty's fault for doing all of the homework in the past, but it is definitely the school's fault always, 100%. It's on brand. Hey, buddy, what? Hey, Holmes.
His son in any way for this incident?
No.
All right.
No, I'm sorry, no.
Okay. Subsequent to that, did Lyle Menendez stay out of Princeton University for a full year?
You have to. And yes.
And then in the I guess it's the spring or the winter term, in January or early February of 1989, did he return to the university?
He returned to Princeton, I think it was around the 1st of February of 89.
Now, I believe you indicated yesterday that Mrs. Menendez used to call you every night at about 7 o'clock during your dinner hour.
Dinner time for us, yes.
Was that during his first semester at Princeton or his second semester in 1989?
Not as much the first semester at Princeton, because on his first semester, he pretty much stayed in the dorm. On the spring of 89, he stayed at my house.
So you had more contact with him the second semester that he was at Princeton versus the first. Is that correct?
Well, physically, he was more there. He was there during the night. But when the first semester, he was there during the day.
All right. So your waking hours were about the same?
I was the same.
Okay.
Yes.
But after Lyle Menendez returned to Princeton University, it was at that time that that his mother would call every single night.
Yes.
Okay. And when he was a freshman, his first semester freshman year in 1987, she called you, didn't she?
2 or 3 times a week.
And so by the time of the spring of 89, it had increased to a daily phone call.
Yes.
I believe you indicated that Mrs. Menendez wanted you to have a key to the condominium in which Lyle Menendez was going to live during his next semester at Princeton.
Yes.
Okay. And I believe that you indicated that the purpose for you having the key was to determine whether or not Lyle Menendez was living with his girlfriend at that.
Was to check on him.
To check on him. But what were you supposed to check? Were you supposed to check to see?
That specifically, Jamie was not living there.
Okay. And at the time, he was approximately 21 years old. Is that correct?
Yeah, he was 21.
And his parents didn't want him living with his girlfriend in the condominium. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, I'd like to draw your attention to some of the testimony yesterday about some of the earlier childhood experiences. I believe you indicated at one point that you attended a theme park with Mrs. Menendez.
Great adventure.
It was called Great Adventures.
Mhm.
And that there was an attraction that Erik Menendez did not want to participate in.
Yes.
Remember that? Now, could you describe? I've forgotten what it was.
Okay, it's like a big tent. And when you walk in, you fall. I mean, there's no balance because you're walking on kind of tubes with air.
So it's inflated.
You got it.
And Erik Menendez wouldn't go inside of that. Is that correct?
No. Erik was not a daring child by nature.
Okay. Now, I believe you've indicated that his mother was, I guess ridicule is probably the right word. Or she certainly made it known to him that she was not
Kitty
happy.
was very annoyed.
Did she ever pick him up and throw him in?
No.
Okay. So to express her displeasure, she verbally told him.
Yes.
Okay. But he didn't go in,
Objection recommended.
Overruled.
right?
He didn't go in, he just cried.
I think you indicated he stood his ground. I think that's what you said.
Yeah, but by the time he left, he felt pretty bad about it. I mean, his opinion of himself was like,
Did Erik cry a lot as a child?
So this is, I mean, the point that she's trying to make is, hey, look, she may have ridiculed Erik because she thought that he was being a little bit too soft, but she never actually threw him in there. I can see that being something in its own context, like in a vacuum, that being something that isn't really that problematic. I mean, is it distasteful? In my opinion, yes. But of course, I'm speaking not from the experience of being a parent. But basically what the prosecution here is trying to do, and what they've been trying to do through quite a few witnesses, is basically showing, yeah, Jose and Kitty were like maybe not the best parents. They were not exactly, the most warm and loving and or at least expressive of love. And maybe they were even bad parents, but that doesn't make them monsters, is basically what they're trying to get at here. That's 100% up to interpretation, but that's what the prosecution is going for. And it's just I'm always struck every single week that we watch these. I'm always struck with how they chose to go about this case in 1993, and how if they had taken this strategy in 1993, at least watching the trial that we're watching, this is the one that, of course, that ended in a mistrial. This is not the one that ended up convicting them. If this trial had happened like this today, I don't think that we would have seen them get convicted. I think they probably would have been acquitted, just because standards have changed. Things have just generally changed. Draco Amy, thank you so much for gifting 1 Legalbytes membership. To a lucky friend in the chat, B, you have been gifted a membership by Draco Amy. So welcome back to Bite Club. And I hope to see you in our next members only live stream, which actually this also is a good opportunity to let you guys know that this Friday, I will actually not be able to do the members only live stream because I will be traveling. I would say I'll push it to Thursday, but I know that the day before I fly is always a crazy day. So I don't want to overpromise. But I we'll definitely have it the following week. I'll be in California for a few weeks. So I'm going to be setting up the California studio back in Southern California. So we'll pick up with everything over there for a few weeks as I go and see family and hang out in the sunshine and whatnot. So okay, anyway, so yeah, just so you guys know, and I will be posting that in the members community tab anyway. So there will be more notice of it, but I figured it better to let you guys know earlier rather than later. So, but once again, Draco Amy, thanks so much for gifting that membership.
I don't think so.
You've indicated that during the period of time when you lived near the Menendez family, when your children were growing up, that you saw them principally on the weekends. Is that correct?
What are you talking, Princeton? Or
Yes.
Okay. During the Princeton years, mainly on the weekend. Their schedule didn't allow for any kind of anything except during the years that Erik was swimming. And then I saw him nightly because my youngest was a swimmer.
Did your so this was your youngest daughter who was also a swimmer?
Yes, and they're the same age.
All right. And did either of the defendants play with your children during any of these family gatherings?
Yes,
Were they close to their cousins?
they were very close.
Now, going back to 1989, I believe you
Okay.
indicated that in June of 1989, at the end of Lyle Menendez's freshman year,
Yes,
that someone came and helped him move out of his dorm room.
my mother and I.
And at the time that he moved out of his dorm room, was his brother Erik Menendez in the Princeton area?
Erik had come over for the weekend.
And did he travel by himself, or was he with one of his
No,
parents?
he traveled by himself.
Did you pick him up at the airport? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
So,
I may have, or Lyle may have. I don't really remember.
so Erik Menendez was present during this time period when you were helping Lyle Menendez move out of his dorm room. Is that
I
correct?
could check the question vague on a present there.
Sustained.
Was he present at the university when you were helping?
That morning? No.
All right. Did you ever see him present at the university during the course of that weekend?
Well, I wasn't at the university. I only went there to help pack, and that was only that morning.
And where did Erik Menendez stay when
In my house.
Okay, thank you. I believe you indicated that Mrs. Menendez had some plans for early September
Yes.
of 1989.
Yes,
I'd like to go over those briefly.
sure.
I think you said that on September the 4th, she was going to go to Princeton.
No,
Okay.
I said the September the 4th was the date set for the closing of the condo.
Okay, and
She was going to go on September the 9th to get Lyle set up and buy furniture for his condo. And she had to return because on the 24th, she had to go to UCLA for Erik.
okay. Was it your understanding that Erik Menendez was going to live on the campus at UCLA
That was my understanding.
or live away from home?
Yes,
And referring to this condominium, Princeton has housing for its students, doesn't it?
Princeton does have housing.
Are you aware, or do you know what the reason was that that Lyle Menendez was going to live in a condominium?
Yes. First of all, Lyle was normally Princeton students stay in campus. They have to on freshman year. And I think on sophomore year, some that do, the majority of them do, some leave. Lyle was by that time a couple of years older than the majority of the freshmen. Okay, and he didn't like living on a dorm. Well, most kids don't, but he was old enough and the university allowed him to live away.
Now, this condominium that he was going to live in, I think you said it was going to close. Does that mean his parents purchased it or was it rented?
No, his parents purchased it. I helped choose it. And it was exactly 2 miles from campus on the right side of Route 1. That means he didn't even have that traffic.
Okay, did he have an automobile in the winter spring semester of 1989?
Overall.
Did he have an automobile at the
Yes, he
university?
did.
And this condominium, could you describe it for me, please?
Sure. It's
In other words, how big was it? How many bedrooms? I think you said 2
it
bedrooms.
had 2 complete suites.
So that means the bathroom and the bedrooms were
It had
adjoining?
a living room, a dining room, corner fireplace, laundry room with washer and dryer, 2 huge bedrooms, 2 full baths.
Do you know how many square feet?
It's around 2,000. Between 18 and 2,000.
And that's where he was going to be living that
Yes.
semester? Then I believe you indicated that on September the 24th, Mrs. Menendez was going to have to be back in Los Angeles for the purpose of taking her younger son off to college.
Yes, Erik would be staying at UCLA, and that's where she was going, the
Okay,
24th.
do you know whether he was going to live in student housing there or was he going to have an apartment, or do you know?
No. I think he was living student housing. That's my understanding.
When was the last time that you spoke to your brother before he died, if you recall?
Well, we were in constant communication because of the condo. I mean, he had called me and said, I want you to go and help Lyle look for a place to live, which I did. And then Lyle saw this condo and loved it. And then I called him. He said, I want Carlos to go see it to make sure that it was worth it. Let me put it this way, financially. And Carlos went over, and we were in constant communication because we were the Princeton link with regards to the condo and the purchasing and all that.
But do you have any specific recollection as to the last conversation that you had with your brother before he died? In other words, do you know if it was within a week of his death or days or?
I talked to him after he came back from nationals. And I know that I had then left for Bermuda with my youngest child. And the day that I came back, I had a couple of messages from him because he had been in Princeton that day. He had stayed at my mother, and that was the Wednesday before he died. But I didn't get to talk to him.
All right. So when you returned,
So it was somewhere in early part of August that we talked to him last.
and you were aware that the Wednesday before he died, he had spent the
He
night
spent the night at my mother's, yes. Who lives like an hour away from us.
I believe you indicated during your direct examination that you saw a change between Mr. and Mrs. Menendez in the way that your brother treated his wife at some point. And what I wanted to ask you was, when was that you first noticed the change?
I noticed it at my father's funeral
And that was in
in
February?
February of '87.
Did you see Mr. and Mrs. Menendez together again after your father's funeral?
Very often.
And did you see that same sort of behavior exhibited by your brother towards?
I saw that behavior until 89. I thought maybe I should move to California. It does help.
So, it did mark a change in his behavior when
Yes.
when they came to California.
Mhm.
Is that yes?
I mean, there was a change in their behavior?
Yes.
Yes, very
You-
much so.
You made a noise and the court reporter couldn't take it down. That's why I asked you to repeat
okay.
it all. Okay. Did you ever see your brother be abusive towards either of his children? And I mean physically abusive.
See, this is one of these interesting things about like why it can be a good idea to build rapport with a witness, even if they are opposing to your interests. That little interaction just now was, the witness thought that the prosecutor was just being snarky, right? And when she said, "Is that a yes?" Because the way that she said it sounded very snooty. It did. It really did. It came across as like, "Is that a yes?" But realistically, she kind of has to say that for the purposes of getting the answer down on the record, because the court reporter can't take down responses that are nonverbal. They can't exactly write down the witness nods in agreement, unless somebody says, "Let the record reflect that the witness is nodding in agreement." But it's a lot easier to just have them say yes. But when you have this sort of like lack of rapport with the witness, you're more likely to have a moment like that is just going to be a little awkward and a little bit off-putting for some other people. So anyway, that's one of those things. Sometimes it's harder to have a rapport, but this is the kind of witness that you totally could have it with, like so long as you're not super fake, like in the Gwyneth Paltrow trial, how the female attorney from the plaintiff's side, how she got like weirdly almost fangirly with her, like she like became her best friend. Like it was as if it was like an Access Hollywood interview. It was kind of how it felt during the cross-examination in that case. But like there is a happy medium between that and like this, with a witness like this who is coming across as very friendly, as very caring, as very warm and empathetic, that you can just have a conversation where you are just sort of pushing back on her without coming across as a little bit of a B word, Also, by the way, Kit Kat, thank you so much for gifting another Legalbytes membership. Melissa Simak, you have been gifted a membership by Kit Kat. So welcome back to Bite Club. I know you've been in it before. And yeah, Kit Kat, thank you so much. Very kind of you. All right, let's continue.
Objection, Your Honor, calls for conclusion.
Overall, do you understand the question?
Yes, I understand the question. I didn't.
You never saw it. After,
You mean physically?
yes, I mean physical.
Okay.
After your brother and your sister-in-law died, I believe you indicated, and I think I asked you as well, that the defendant stayed with you on occasion at your home in the Princeton area. Is that correct?
You mean Erik and Lyle?
Yes.
Yes.
And I think you indicated that Erik never stayed for more than 24 hours.
Erik only stayed a week when he got very sick with severe stomach pains. And go ahead.
Do you remember when the Detective Zoller and some other detectives came to see you in about September the 17th of 1989?
Yes, I do remember.
And
Yes.
at that time, both Erik Menendez and his brother Lyle Menendez were at your home.
We're at my house. Yes, so was my mother and half the world.
And had you talked to Erik Menendez about the events of the night of August the 20th as of that time?
I'm going to object to this as beyond the scope.
Overall, you can answer the question.
No, I did not.
All right. Did you talk to Lyle Menendez after his parents' death and before the police officers came to see you on September the 17th? Had you spoken to Lyle Menendez?
About what? About the death?
Yes.
No, I did not.
Okay. After his parents' death, did Lyle Menendez indicate to you that he thought he was being followed?
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay. Respect the microphone.
All right, is this being offered for the truth?
No, it's not.
All right, the objection is overruled. It will not be received for the truth of the statement, just the state of mind of the declarant. The
Yes.
All right. And
I object that that's not relevant.
Overruled.
did Lyle Menendez hire bodyguards?
And sorry, I'm going to interrupt real quick because we have a good question here. Christian Williams says, what does beyond the scope mean? So beyond the scope means it's referring to the scope of cross-examination or the scope of direct examination. The cross-examination, the questions that are asked in cross-examination can only fall within the scope of the subject matter that came up during the direct examination. So the questions that were asked by Erik and Lyle's team, those are the only subjects that the cross-examination can get into. So if there are some other subjects that have to do with other incidents, for example, from Erik and Lyle's childhood or their schooling or anything like that is not a subject that came up on direct examination, unless it's somehow necessary to rebut another conversation or it's necessary to give proper context to that kind of stuff. It's not something that can properly get explored in cross-examination. So if you think about it, it's like as you look at trial in general, for each witness, we're kind of bouncing back and forth between the two sides. In this case in chief, the defense case in chief, these are witnesses that are put on by the defense. So it starts with the direct examination with the defense attorneys asking the questions, then cross-examination, and then the defense can do redirect. Then the prosecution can do recross, then redirect again, then recross again. They can go all the way, bounce back and forth many, many times, but each time it has to be within the scope of the previous testimony. So it kind of narrows down. That way you don't end up just going back and forth forever with every single witness. So it really is supposed to be like this inverse iceberg, you could say, where it just gets narrower and narrower the deeper that you get into the testimony. Now, as Kurt says, different judges have different tolerances for beyond the scope of objections. Some judges don't care as much. Some judges don't really care at all. Absolutely correct. So it's all, as you guys can tell, from just the style of this courtroom, they are particularly sensitive to argumentative questions of witnesses, right? Or argumentative statements, things that would fly in the Depp v. Heard case, for example, like Camille's cross in Depp v. Heard would not fly in this courtroom because she was very, very in your face with Amber Heard in a lot of ways that this judge would not tolerate. So every courtroom, every judge, they all have sort of their own preferences. So how much they care about certain things. Sometimes they care more about certain objections than other objections, but within the scope means that the cross-examination is supposed to be within the scope of the direct examination within reason. So I hope that explains, that clarifies for you.
Yes.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
All right, redirect.
Mrs. Baralt,
Yes.
Mrs. Bazanich asked you a number of questions, and I'd like to follow up on some of them.
Okay.
She asked you if your brother had a good sense of humor.
So now this is redirect for folks that are a little bit unfamiliar with the trial process.
Remember that?
Yes, he did.
Did he tend to get sarcastic?
Yes, he did.
And was his humor sometimes at other people's expense? That is, they would be the source of the humor or the joke.
Sometimes.
Did you see him sometimes tell people false things? Like somebody's got false teeth, or somebody's not supposed to have coffee, or somebody has cancer, and then everybody in the
Yes.
party would treat that person in a strange way?
Yes.
So the humor was sometimes at other people's expense.
Yes.
And could he also use his humor or his sarcasm as a way of communicating displeasure, that he disagreed with people? Like in a discussion, would he get sarcastic if he had a different point of view than you did?
Sometimes, but he didn't have to resort to that. He would tell you straight out
In no uncertain terms.
in no uncertain terms.
And would he do that with his children as well? In terms of telling them pretty straight out what he thought, what he expected of them?
I think so. I think he was pretty clear.
You were asked whether he wanted the best for his son, and you said you can't make children want to succeed. What did you mean by that?
Well, he and many parents do in general, you want things for your children and you want them, and you've never stopped to really think, is that what they want for themselves? And Jose had a tremendous amount of inner drive. That's why he got where he was so fast. Nobody pushed him. He pushed himself. And he wanted his children to succeed. Most parents do, but he was relentless. I mean, it was going to be done, period. And I think he forgot to ask the children if that's what they wanted.
You were asked if there's a difference in the way girls are raised versus the way boys are raised, and we were talking particularly about protectiveness. Do you remember?
I remember. They had their own ideas of how the difference between raising a little girl and a little boy, which we didn't share.
Okay.
I think a baby is a baby, and there's no sex to it.
So an 18-month-old, be it girl or boy, crossing the street
yes.
is still in danger.
They didn't believe in cuddling, because you don't want to make this little boy a little girl. Do you know? Girls is okay, but in boys, you treat them, a little more businesslike. It's not the same cuddling, and we disagree basically on that.
Well, do you think there's a difference between a 3-year-old girl and a 3-year-old boy in terms of being exposed to a dangerous dog?
No, neither an 8-year-old girl or an 8-year-old boy either.
Did you talk to Kitty and Jose about the fact that you thought that the children were exposed to danger? Or do you think that's the kind of thing you have a right to do?
Objection beyond the scope.
Can I have a question on that, please?
Did you talk to Kitty and Jose about the fact that you thought that children were exposed to danger, or do you think that's the kind of thing you have a right to do?
Rephrase the question, please.
You talked about the difference in perspective that you have with regard to girls versus boys and exposing children to danger. Did you ever express your concerns in that area to Kitty and Jose?
I did, but remember, they were...
Yeah, I probably, I don't want to spend too long on this, but it is interesting. The gender thing about raising boys versus raising kids, that is 100% something that would be treated very, 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 very differently today. Extremely differently. I mean, for so many reasons, gender identity is such a huge subject today. And without, getting into, the nuances of that, but I think we can all recognize that is a conversation that comes up quite a bit in politics and on social media. We don't talk about politics on this channel, generally speaking, but this is one of those cultural sort of changes between 1993 and now. I mean, even just a few years ago, even I would say. But yeah, again, it's just so fascinating to see the differences between between that. I mean, a lot of people would look even less kindly upon Jose and Kitty for the comment about like they didn't want their boys to become girls. There's a lot of people that would think and feel a very certain kind of way about that kind of comment. So anyway,
Where they thought that
All right,
was
you've
over-
answered the question.
And did they seem to welcome your suggestions?
No.
Did they make it clear to you whether they wanted your input or not?
I don't think they came right out and said it. Remember, they thought I was overprotective.
Okay.
So it's obsolete what I think, you know. Anything I think, it's just dismissed.
The family gatherings, I think you were asked
Yes,
about family gatherings. Did the kids like to go to family
they
gatherings?
loved them. I think they loved them more than any other kid in the room.
They played, did they get to play with other kids there?
They loved
Which kids we're talking about, hers or?
mine, Martha's,
Okay.
and
Did
and
Lyle-
Carlos Menendez's.
Did Lyle and Erik like going to the family gatherings?
They loved it.
And is it Lyle and Erik you were talking about who loved it more than the other kids?
Yes.
They seem to be really happy there playing with the other children.
They love family. That's one of the comments that Lyle always made when he came to my house. I have a very happy family, and it's always full of young people. Don't ask me why. I haven't experienced the empty nest yet. But he loved coming over, and more so than any other child.
Did that cause problems with Kitty, the fact that he loved being at your house so much? When he was a child, was there some resentment because he was so happy at your house?
Well, when he was a child, he wasn't brought us over as when he was able to drive and come over.
He was what?
When he was a child, they didn't bring him as often as when he was able to drive, and then he was there all the time.
And, okay, so was there some resentment at that point, once he could come over on his own?
I think so. Yes.
You were asked by Mrs. Bazanich about the situation in which Lyle was accused of cheating at Princeton,
Yes.
and he was subsequently suspended for a year. Is that correct?
Yes.
And your understanding is that it had something to do with him borrowing some lab notes and turning in work based on somebody else's lab notes. Is that
Yes.
generally correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, when Jose and Kitty were told about this, you said that Jose flew in. Is that correct?
Yes.
And was he there to reprimand Lyle, or was he there to make sure Lyle stayed in Princeton?
He was there to make sure Lyle stayed at Princeton. I think the main issue was forgotten, which was that there was cheating involved.
Your Honor, move to strike. I think that as being non-responsive, as being speculation.
yeah, it's any amount of doubt in this courtroom is going to get you a speculation objection, and it's probably going to get granted. So, saying I think this happened, I think that happened, is just kind of one of those things. Ow, cat. Hey, buddy. Okay. And also, Melissa Simon, thank you so much for gifting one Legalbytes membership. Very much appreciated. Very kind and generous of you. Kara, maybe you are now a member of Bite Club. Welcome, welcome. Happy to have you here.
Did you sit in on conversations with your brother with regard to this issue? With regard to the principal?
I don't remember that. I remember him being there. I remember being talked about it, but I don't remember sitting with him.
Okay, but you remember hearing him talk about the situation, is that
Yes.
correct? Was
Yes.
his concern over the fact there had been cheating, or over the fact that his son was going to be thrown out of Princeton?
That calls for conclusion on what it was.
Based on what you heard, was the concern because his son had cheated, or was the concern because he was going to be thrown out of Princeton?
Because he was,
Objection sustained. The answer, sir.
It's based on, I asked what she heard.
The way you phrased it.
Okay. Did you hear Jose Menendez say whether his concern was that Lyle had cheated or his concern was that Lyle was going to be thrown out of Princeton?
I think the concern at that time was that he was going to be asked to leave the university.
No, I need to strike that statement.
Objection sustained. The answer, struck.
Did you know that throughout high school, Lyle and Erik, Lyle's parents had done homework for him?
Objection assumes fact, not evidence.
I'm asking if she knew, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Yes, I did.
And did you know that Lyle's father had in fact written a paper for Lyle while he was at Princeton?
Yes, the Federal Express paper came to my house.
Had you ever had any conversations with your brother or his wife with regard to the fact that they participated in helping Lyle cheat in school?
Yes, we discussed that.
Did you feel this was wrong behavior?
Objection irrelevant.
Sustained.
Did they express they thought this was wrong behavior?
No, they didn't think there was anything wrong with that.
Were they very upset, Kitty and Jose, about the fact that Lyle was not going to be in Princeton for a period of time?
Probably.
Kitty was angry.
Did Kitty, in fact, lie to people about it?
Yes, which placed me in a very difficult position.
So she did.
By the way, also Shireen with the member chat for 10 months, getting close to 1 year. Yes, you are. You're getting very close. Melissa Simok also with a Bite Club chat in the chat. Bite Club rules. Awesome. Love it. Love it. Love it. And also Shireen, thank you so much for gifting another Legalbytes membership. Dater, you have been gifted a membership by Shireen. So welcome to Bite Club. And Arto Rissanen with a member for 7 months with a member chat. I feel like a slow poke, but I just can't catch up with you ladies, he says. Wonderful.
She didn't want anybody to know.
No.
I think you told us in some detail the number of times that you saw the family in 1986 after they moved, which was 3 times before Thanksgiving, and then Christmas.
Yes.
In 1987, your father died in February, I believe.
Yes.
So you saw them at the funeral. Did you see them again in 1987?
Yes, I did see them because at that time they were in the process of selling the Mountain Avenue home.
So they were back in New Jersey.
Yes,
Do you have any,
especially Jose.
okay. Do you have any idea how many times in 1987 Jose was back in New Jersey and you saw him?
I don't remember. He was there often because there were negotiations going on.
Is often to you 5 times in the year, 10 times in the year,
Oh.
15 times?
Often to me means 2 times a month, approximately.
So 1987, Jose was in Princeton about twice a month. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. And was Kitty with him? Some of the time, all of the time, never?
Some of the time.
Now, what about 1988?
I didn't see that much of them in 88.
And what does not that much mean? You only saw
That
them 4 or
means
5
that
times? Or-
I may have seen, I don't think I saw Kitty maybe 2 or 3 times in the year because at that time Lyle was not in Princeton.
So they weren't back there as often.
They were not.
And were they calling as often when he wasn't back in Princeton?
No, I was not talking to her as often.
Now, the condominium that you're talking about, it was due to close in September.
Yes.
When was it initially purchased? When was the decision made to actually buy that condo?
I think we're talking July.
And were Kitty and Jose coming back and looking at the condo or just taking your word for it?
They were taking Jose was taking Carlos's financial word for it, and they were taking my personal opinion for it.
Okay.
Yes.
And did Lyle get to see the condo?
Lyle shows the condo.
Okay, so he was back there looking at condos along with you?
Yes, he came over for a couple of weeks, and we looked at first apartments to rent in the Princeton area, inside, outside, everywhere. And then finally we saw this.
And you said it had 2 complete suites?
Yes.
Now, was one of them to be for Kitty and Jose when they came back to visit?
Well, one of them, they were going to furnish it, and he could use it. He could have friends over, but if they came into the Princeton area, they could stay there.
So if Kitty and Jose came to the Princeton area, they could stay in the condominium?
Yes.
And was Jose still making frequent trips to the Princeton area? Was he still there about twice a month?
Yes, for the night.
Okay. And when you were given or were asked to take the key so that you could check whether Jamie had moved in, was Lyle still going with Jamie at that time, or had they already split up?
They had, but he had come in July and had gone over, I think it was to Boston or somewhere with her. And they were worried that he would resume seeing Jamie.
Did the parents seem to want you to report to them on what Lyle's activities were?
More specifically, Kitty.
Okay.
Jose didn't ask that many questions. He just wanted to know how Lyle was doing.
But
Kitty wanted details.
Did this put you in an awkward position?
Very much so, because sometimes as an adult and as a parent, I felt I had the obligation to really inform them if I saw things that I didn't like he was skipping classes, he wasn't studying enough, partying too much, that sort of a thing. But it should have been done on an adult basis, on an information, something that they could act on it. What happened is whenever I did that.
Okay, let me ask you the next question.
Okay.
Did they seem to already know a lot of things that were going on?
There's speculation.
There's another way to ask that, to get that information. The question is it worth it enough? I mean, it could be that just asking that question, you can kind of suggest that to the jury. I don't know, but it's not quite here. By the way, Sandra Ramirez, thank you so much for gifting another Legalbytes membership. Very kind and generous of you. Bronwyn W., you've been gifted a membership by Sandra Ramirez, so welcome back to Bike Club.
I think you were asked, the last question you were asked by Mrs. Bazanich was whether you saw any abuse. And your answer was, you asked her, you mean physical abuse?
Mm-hmm.
And you never witnessed any physical abuse. Is that correct?
I never did.
But since you seem to highlight physical abuse, did you observe any other behavior that you thought was abusive?
Well, children have very fragile minds, and you can inflict a lot of mental abuse on a child, which I think is more devastating.
Mental strike, I think, is more devastating than
Sustain that portion of the action.
And is that the type?
And the reason for that is because she is not an expert. So, you know, her opinion as to which is worse, physical abuse or mental abuse, although she is a human being and she's entitled to her own opinion, just as anybody else is. And when she's up there acting as a witness, she cannot testify to like what she thinks is worse, physical or mental or emotional abuse. Because she has not been qualified as an expert. That's the kind of testimony that really only an expert would be able to testify to. And even then, I think that they would probably usually be somewhat circumspect with the way that they say it, because they're going to be professionals usually. Almost always they're professionals when they are acting as expert witnesses, especially in the area of talking about abuse and psychology and all that kind of stuff. They're going to be, you know, psychologists that are very, very well experienced in order to be qualified as an expert. So they are probably more likely to be a little bit more circumspect about, like, saying such a broad statement that mental abuse is more harmful than physical abuse. More likely they would say that it can be more harmful than physical abuse in some instances. That the physical wounds will heal, in a certain matter of time, but the mental abuse harms, the injuries from mental abuse take a lot longer to treat and sometimes don't always go away. So that's like what a professional, what an expert witness would probably say on that kind of a thing. But I don't fault her for wanting to give her opinion on that, because she clearly has a strong opinion about what she saw and about the impact that it had on Erik and Lyle. Also, Cherry C. Mills, member for 7 months. Thanks so much for the member chat. No text with it, but I appreciate the support.
Type of abuse you think you saw?
Yes.
I'm looking for that.
Any examination on behalf of Erik?
Mrs. Baralt, you were asked by Mrs. Bozanich about Erik as a child, whether he cried a lot. And you had indicated you didn't think he particularly cried a lot. Is that correct?
Erik had a very sunny disposition.
Now, was there a particular activity of his mother's, a particular habit of hers, though, that upset Erik a lot, and where you did see him being upset a lot? For example, was she on time when taking him places?
Okay. Erik hated to be late. He was paranoid about being late because they were always late. I mean, that was a trademark of Kitty.
Or she was always late. And did he appear to dislike it because it embarrassed him? What would you see her bringing him late to places?
To school, to swim practice, to soccer games. I remember one day I was supposed to drive, and I was driving Erik, and the whole trip was, on Terry, if I'm going to be late, I won't go in. On Terry, I'm not going to be embarrassed like that again. On Terry. I said, Erik, you're going to be on time. I'm driving you. He said, on Terry, I'm warning you. If I'm late, I'm not going in. I mean, the whole trip. This is rare on a small child.
So he seemed very anxious about being late.
Very, very.
And yet you saw his mother making him late all the time.
Because Kitty was always late.
And did she try to make up for this by always driving too fast? Did she always drive too fast?
Yes, regardless.
Now, during the time when Erik was swimming, you said your daughter, Anna Maria, who is his age, was also swimming.
Yes.
Was there anything about Erik physically and swimming that you noticed?
Well, normally children, when they learn to swim, it's because they can float.
Mm-hmm.
Erik never had any fat. I mean, he never did. And so for Erik to learn to swim, especially backstroke or butterfly, was extremely, extremely difficult because he couldn't float. And
So
he
his body would sink.
Yes, he would sink or swim the backstroke sitting down. And of course, that was not, these kids were going to stroke clinics, and it was like he couldn't learn. It was nothing, had nothing to do with that. Had to do with the fact that he couldn't float.
Did he appear to be physically comfortable with swimming, with being wet?
He hated it.
How could you tell?
Well, take a child when everybody's practicing, and he spent the whole time pretending to adjust the goggles, body half out, shivering, because there was no fat. He just...
So given his physical build, it was quite uncomfortable for him to participate in swimming.
Yes, he was good at it. But
Okay. But he did train and practice, and he won some, he would win.
he was
trophies.
good. He was good, especially freestyle and breaststroke, because it was a matter, and the speed, events, never on the long distance, because on long distance you do require to float. The speed events, he was strong. He was great.
And he worked hard at it.
That kind of reminds me of some of the stories that Andy would tell me, which maybe if we all whisper, we can summon Andy into the chat. Andy. No, I remember Andy telling me about when he was at West Point, his first year at West Point. Everyone has to take plebe swimming or plebe diving, swimming, I think is what it was. It's like there are like certain things you have to do in a pool, and you have to like learn how to do certain things in a pool, not just like learning how to swim, but like military things. And people used to call it plebe drowning because it just was like so difficult and very uncomfortable. But I remember Andy saying that he had such a hard time with plebe drowning, quote unquote, because problems. He had not enough body fat content. And so he would always end up just like sinking down to the bottom of the pool as he was like trying to do the things that they were supposed to do in the pool. And I just remember being like, I was like, I don't even feel bad for you, because you just like, that is like not a problem that I have ever had in my entire life, ever at all. Even in my most in shape, I have never had that problem. Like, screw you, go away. So it kind of reminds me of that. So yeah.
Didn't he?
I don't know if he worked at it. He was too cold to really work at it.
Now, you've described that you noticed a difference in the relationship between your brother and your sister-in-law after they had moved to California.
Yes, I did.
Did you know at that time that it was after they moved to California that Kitty discovered Jose's affair?
No.
Objection. Zeus does not know that.
Did you know that there had, at the time that you saw them, did either of them mention to you that there had been talk of divorce?
No.
Kitty never told you about the affair, is that right?
Never.
Now, you've described that in, was it September of 1989, Erik became ill. Somehow he had some stomach problem.
Erik had severe stomach pains.
Had he stopped eating?
I really don't remember if he did stop eating. He lost a lot of weight. They both did after Jose and Kitty's death. I mean, like, they shed like close to 20 pounds in a week and a half.
And Erik seemed to have lost a lot of weight as well.
It's hard on Erik to see on Erik because he's always so thin. But yes, he didn't look in good shape. And he was with severe stomach pains. And then, of course, assumption on our part, they were in pain.
Okay, so you took Erik to the doctor.
Yes, I did.
And was this the same doctor who had been his pediatrician
Throughout, since he was 6.
And that doctor did an examination of him, correct?
Yes.
You were asked about the incident at the amusement park. Do you recall when Erik refused to go into this attraction? Do you recall his mother calling him a coward in front of you and in front of your girl, Anna Maria?
A coward, yes, that word was used. Yes.
Now, would it be fair to say that you got to know Lyle best after the rest of the family moved to California and he started spending a lot of time alone with you at your house?
Yes, that's right.
Before the family moved to California, did you ever spend that kind of time alone with Erik?
No, I did not. He came over, but it was not the quality time.
And would it be fair to say that most of the time you saw Erik, until his parents died, he was with one or the other of them? or in a sporting activity.
Yes, I would say that's correct.
After your brother and sister-in-law died, did Erik appear uncomfortable to be at your house?
Yes, Erik appeared very uncomfortable to be near the family members.
And is this during the period when he never spent more than 24 hours in your house?
That is correct.
And did that include Christmas of '89?
He came, I believe, the 24th and left the 25th.
I have nothing further. Nathan.
Any recross?
We're on recross.
Mrs. Baralt,
Yes,
during the summer of '89, I believe you indicated you were in fairly regular telephone contact with your brother, Jose Menendez. Is that
yes,
correct?
yes, I was.
Did he ever express during that summer any displeasure with Lyle Menendez?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for hearsay, and we reject 352 grams as well.
Overall.
I think he was upset. He mentioned just once that he was upset about Lyle having been placed on disciplinary probation.
And that was during the summer of 1989?
Yes,
I believe you indicated on redirect that you were talking about having to report to the Menendez parents about Lyle's behavior at Princeton University, and you made reference to partying too much or skipping classes. Did that kind of behavior occur?
he wasn't partying more so than any other kid, but sometimes I knew that he had skipped a class or things like that. And I was extremely uncomfortable. I felt, like I said, if somebody sees that on my child, I want to know because it's guidance, you know.
Did you, in fact, tell his parents when he skipped class or when you thought that he was not following the regulations as he should?
I did, and I got in trouble.
Right. And did you do that as in his second semester in 1989 as well?
In 89.
And that was when you were reporting more?
That's when Kitty was calling on a daily basis, trying to extract information.
Now, I believe that you indicated as well on redirect that your brother had drive and that he pushed himself, that he was relentless. Do you remember saying that?
Yes, I did.
How old was your brother when he came to this country?
16.
And do you know where he lived when he got to this country?
Yes. He lived in Cunningham, Pennsylvania, which is a suburb of Hazleton, with Carlos's family,
Carlos being,
my husband.
so your parents weren't here at that time, is that correct?
My parents were not.
And did he have to complete high school at that time?
He finished his senior year in high school, graduated from Hazleton High School, and then came to live with us.
And then at some point he started college, is that correct?
Carlos's father was a university professor at Southern Illinois, and he arranged for a scholarship for Jose.
During the period of time that Jose Menendez was at college, did he also have to work to support himself?
Yes, all the time, always.
And I believe he was about 19 years old when he married Mary Louise Menendez.
He had just turned 19.
And then he graduated from college, I believe you indicated in 64 or 65.
It's either 65 or 66. I don't really remember because this is not a graduation that we all attend. This is something that you do, you work, you get your degree, and not a big deal. Okay.
Now, skipping ahead to
Yes.
when Lyle was at Princeton University, was Lyle an athlete? In other words, did he participate in athletic events at the university, to your knowledge?
Lyle was a top tennis player.
And did he play tennis at Princeton University?
Yes, he did.
During the year of 1988, do you know where Lyle Menendez was living while he wasn't at Princeton University?
I believe we was in Alabama.
During the entire year of 1988?
Okay. Let me get this clear. 88, first semester. I believe he was in Alabama with Jamie.
During the entire year?
Don't pin me down to that one.
You
I
don't know
don't
the answer.
remember. I
Okay.
don't remember exactly.
Mrs. Baralt, you indicated that Erik used to come over to your house. Was that before the family moved to California in 1986? In the year before they moved, like between 85 and 86, would Erik Menendez come to your home?
Not as much.
By that time, he was 16 years old.
No, not really. In 86, Erik was 15 when they move at 15, and you don't drive there until 17, remember?
All right, so how far away from the home did you live?
Hardly 15, 20 minutes by car.
Okay. Now, you indicated that shortly after their parents' deaths that both of the defendants lost a substantial amount of weight. Is that correct?
Very much so.
And I believe you told the juries that they were in a lot of pain. Is that correct?
Yes, they were.
Did you ever consider that they might be worried about being caught?
Objection, Your Honor, cause for speculation.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Just briefly,
Doesn't matter. All she needed was to get the question in front of the jury, right? Like they just it sometimes that last question, you know, if you got an objection, you drew an objection, it got sustained, you know it's going to be sustained anyway, because it's argumentative, but you just want to put that thought in the jury's mind that, you know, could it have been that they lost all that weight and they seemed very agitated because they were just worried about getting caught as opposed to, you know, grieving the death of their parents?
Mrs. Baralt, you said that your brother had expressed some concerns about Lyle and being on disciplinary probation.
Yes.
And was this an incident in which there was some damage done to a pool table at Princeton University? Is that the incident?
Yes. But do you know how the damage was done? By cleaning it. They put Clorox to remove the stains. And of course, the felt faded.
And as a result, Lyle was put on disciplinary probation.
Lyle was not there. Lyle was asleep. But he was the one who took the rap for it.
Thank you.
I just said something briefly.
You were asked by Mrs. Bozanich to describe some aspects of your brother's life when he first came to this country at 16.
Yes.
Your brother had not been pushed or pressured in your home, had he?
Never.
In fact, he was totally indulged and spoiled as a child, was he not?
Yeah, you could say that.
And when he was going to high school, he wasn't being forced to practice tennis 6 hours a day.
No, well, he didn't play tennis. He was a swimmer.
Okay, he wasn't being forced to practice swimming.
My parents weren't there. Whatever he did because it came from his inner drive. Yes.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Thank you. Mr. Down, excused.
Thank you, sir.
They should be subject to recall.
No, you're excused, but you can be called back on notice by the lawyers.
Okay, very good.
All right, so we'll take a recess, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll resume at 10 minutes after the hour. Don't discuss the matter with anyone. Don't form any final opinions about it, and we'll resume at 10 minutes after 11.
I don't know how much of you guys could, how much of that you guys could see, but Holmes was going into the couch cover. And he's been doing this lately where he wants to go, like, he wants to play under the couch cover for whatever reason. He's got the zoomies right now.
Yes.
Asked, which I believe to be true. I saw our notes, but we're still going to object to another note that Mr. Cano was only.
Oh, and we are going to go ahead and skip ahead. So, all right. I think this should be it.
Would you raise your right hand, please, to the sworn? You solemnly swear that the testimony you may give in the cause now pending before this court should be the
All right,
truth,
next
the whole truth,
witness.
and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Go ahead. Please do.
All right, take a seat in the jury box, please.
Yes, my name is Peter J. Cano, Cano, Cano.
Mr. Cano, are you the uncle of Lyle and Erik Menendez?
Yes,
And were you married to Marta Cano?
yes,
And are you now divorced?
yes, we are.
And how long have you been divorced?
Since 1979 or 1980
And where do you live now?
in Puerto Rico, San Juan, Puerto Rico.
During the time that you were married to Marta, did you ever have occasion to stay at the Menendez home in Muncie, New York?
Yes, I did.
And this was the home of Kitty and Jose Menendez, is
Yes,
that correct?
ma'am. Yes.
And at the time you were staying there, were the boys small?
Yes, they were very small. We're going back to 1972 or 1973.
So in 1970, say if it's 1973 and Lyle was born in 68, he would have been about.
And civil law, you say Wilford Brumley. I say this is eventually what Stan Lee kind of looks like. So I see Stan Lee. And by the way, also I want to answer some questions here, or a question. Debbie Faison Cook, the judge in the Yon case, said he wouldn't allow more than one cross and redirect, maybe because he's pro se. Some judges are particular on that also because they're very concerned about timing, and so they want to see everybody kind of get it in a direct and a cross examination, and that's it, rather than going back and forth multiple times. So some, like I said before, some judges are just sticklers on different kinds of things. So it could be because one of them is pro se, or that could just be that judge's tendency overall in general. With pro se parties, it's a lot. There's a very hefty learning curve, you could say, for them to be figuring out what they're supposed to be doing at trial. So getting them to understand keeping things within the scope of the prior cross-examination or the prior direct examination, that can be a little bit difficult to get them to understand and to kind of keep things in an orderly fashion. So it could be that the judge in that case just said, this is just a lot simpler if we just do it like this. And then there's also a question in the chat. Dionysia Jaclo says, what is pro se? Where is, for some reason, it's being slow. StreamYard's being a little slow. Oh, right here. Here it is. Pro se means when someone is representing themselves. They don't have an attorney that is representing them. So sometimes you have a trial where the party decides to represent themselves. It's usually not recommended, but some people would rather represent themselves because they don't trust any lawyers. They don't trust lawyers in general, or they don't trust the lawyers that they've seen so far. And yeah, Cat A, just like Daryl Brooks, that's a very clear example of first of all, a pro se party, but also a pro se party who probably should not have been a pro se party. So yes. And yeah, that is it. Okay. Let's continue.
About 5 years old,
Yes,
and Erik would have been about 2.5.
just about.
And did you have an opportunity to observe the interaction of Lyle and Erik and their parents?
Yes, I did.
And in particular, did you observe a situation in which Jose Menendez had a confrontation with his son, Lyle Menendez?
Yes.
And did this confrontation start out with, how did the situation start? Let's do it that way.
Yes, we were having a family gathering, and Lyle was very restless and hyperactive. He couldn't sit still, so he was kind of running. and Jose shouted at him, "Stop!" And apparently he didn't hear.
Okay, now when you say apparently he didn't hear, was that because he didn't stop?
He didn't stop.
Now, normally when Jose yelled stop, would he stop?
By all means, yes, he would.
So on this occasion, he didn't stop.
No, he didn't.
And what happened?
Well, Jose stood up, grabbed him, and just looked at him, and right in the eyes, and said something to him that I couldn't hear. And Lyle became incontinent at the time.
And also, sorry, there's another question here from Jan. Is pro per the same thing as pro se? I think they are the same. Generally speaking, yes, they are interchangeable. Some states have preferences on what they use one way or another. California is generally pro se as opposed to pro per. So my default is usually to refer to a litigant that is representing themselves or that doesn't have an attorney representing themselves as pro se as opposed to pro per. But it's yes, generally speaking, when someone's using one term or the other, it's the same concept.
And what do you mean by he became incontinent?
Well, he wetted himself on the floor.
Thanks.
And how did he look when this happened?
He looked pale and trembling.
We have an identification of the date or time frame this happened.
I believe he said it was 1972 or 73.
Yes.
Okay.
And now all the family is around when this is happening?
Yes, we had a family gathering as we did every year, and that was in December 1972, 1973.
And after that happened, you said Lyle looked pale. Did he look like, was he laughing? Did he look sad?
No, on the contrary, he looked very scared.
And what happened after that?
Well, after he became incontinent, his father took him to Lyle's room, and I followed him.
Now, was that down a hallway?
Yes, he was.
Why did you follow him?
Because,
Sustained.
Okay, you followed him.
yes, I did follow him
Where did they go?
to Lyle's room.
And did you go into the room?
Yes, I entered the room, and I kind of yelled at him. When I say him, at Jose's, because Jose was doing things that, according to myself, were way out of it. And Jose, in that instance,
Well,
hit Lyle
Okay.
Oy.
How did he hit Lyle?
with his closed fist,
Where did he hit him?
either on his chest or belly.
Did he seem to hit him hard?
Yes, he did.
And Lyle would have been about 5 years old at this time?
Yes, yes.
Yikes.
And did Lyle cry out in any way?
I don't remember seeing him crying. He just, I don't know how, but he took it. And apparently he lost his hair or something because he looked very pale, and that was it. I did kind of shouted at Jose.
Okay, now, did he?
There's the physical abuse that the prosecution keeps asking about. There it is.
Hit him in the chest with his closed fist?
Yes, ma'am.
And did he seem to be hitting him hard, or was he just
Yes,
fooling
very
around?
hard.
Overall,
Did he hit him hard, or was he just fooling around?
No, no, no.
Prosecution, can we not get more details on this, please? Can we just move past it? we don't want to stick to this. Objection, objection, objection. I don't like this. Note that the judge did overrule that objection, though, which, you know, there's a point towards him not being as biased. I guess I should note that we tend to point out when he seems to be biased against the defense, but this is in favor of the defense right now, which is a pretty important piece of testimony here.
No, very hard. in my estimation, very hard.
So is Jose a big man?
Big and strong.
And after you witnessed him hitting Lyle like this, did you say something to Jose?
I certainly did.
What did you say?
I cannot repeat the same things that I did say. I gave him a good piece of my mind, and I told him that was not the way to bring up a child. To which he responded that if I didn't like that, I could leave his house, that he could raise his children as he saw fit.
Did you leave his house?
Yes, I did.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Examination on behalf of Erik.
Wow. Very short, direct examination, but what more do they really need from him? That is a very important piece here because of this question that has come up many, many times from the prosecution on cross-examination of all of these other witnesses that say that they saw emotional abuse. They saw things that they considered to be abusive. And the answer was always no. I never saw Kitty hit Erik or Lyle. I never saw Jose hit Erik or Lyle. But this is a witness that is testifying to seeing Jose hit Lyle, and the circumstances of that closed fist hit also suggests that these kinds of things happened in private because remember it happened in Lyle's room. So it also suggests that if there are other instances like this, they are less likely to be in front of other people. They're less likely to be out in the living room, out in the kitchen, out in other places. They're more likely to be in a private space like this where no one else would see it. No one else would witness it. So the likelihood of somebody else witnessing this kind of physical abuse is relatively low because Peter testifies that he followed them in there and then he saw it because I guess Jose didn't notice him following them, I suppose. But good Lord, I can't even imagine as a 5-year-old, already the embarrassment, the trauma of going through wetting your pants in front of other people on top of, that it's a response to trauma also in its own. And then getting hit by your parent for that. It's just like so many levels upon levels upon levels of like just this memory is just so horrible for Lyle that going through something like that is just, oh God, just awful. Awful, awful, awful. Okay.
Erik Menendez. Cross-examination.
Mr. Cano, did you ever go back to the Menendez house after this incident?
Not to that house. I did go to the next house they bought. I just for a family gathering again, but without staying at the house.
So you were staying at the house during this incident?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you ever see the family again at any family gatherings after this incident?
Yes, several times.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Anything else? All right, thank you. You may step down. You're excused.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. And let me see counsel here at the sidebar as far as your next witness. Is excuse the Erik Menendez jury until 1:30 and don't discuss the case with anyone. Don't form any final opinions about it. And if you would return here at 1:30, we'll resume with you. And as far as the Lyle Menendez jury, I want you to remain just for a couple of minutes here, and then we'll deal with you. So if the Erik Menendez jury, you can go to lunch, and we'll see you back here at 1:30. As far as the Lyle Menendez jury is concerned, there's one brief matter I want to discuss with the lawyers before excusing you. So just to keep you here and to expedite it when we want you back, as soon as the bailiff clears this jury room, make sure there's no one in there. We'll just ask you to go in there for a minute and wait in there, and then we'll have you come back. It's quicker than have you go next door. So as soon as he comes out and we know there's no other jurors in there, we'll send you in there.
It's going to be more than a minute.
It won't be very long,
So we'll
just a
fast
couple
forward
minutes.
It is going to be.
All right, the jurors have left, and counsel provided the court with 2 witness statements. Okay, and are you ready with the other witness?
It's more like 20 minutes at the.
All right,
the
now I
other
take
jury
there
has
is
to wait.
nothing to discuss regarding the next witness.
Jen Stoltzfus, followed by Barbara Zussman.
Oh, I thought it was, so Mrs. Whalen is.
Mrs. Whalen is, but I'm, that's the first one we decided on. Take slowly.
Okay, then let's get the jury out and we'll proceed with the next witness. Okay, this is your next witness. All right, would you raise your right hand, please, and face the court clerk?
This morning, you solemnly swear that the testimony you may give in the cause now pending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. I do. Please seated. Could you tell us your full name, spell your last name?
My name is Janet Sorg Stoltzfus, Stolt, Z as in zebra, F as in fox, U, S as in Sam.
Okay.
Mrs. Stoltzfus, what is your occupation?
I'm a teacher.
And where do you teach?
I teach at Princeton Day School in Princeton, New Jersey.
And is Princeton's Day School also known as PDS?
Yes, it is.
And how long have you been teaching at Princeton Day School?
I taught there from 1978 to 1986, and then spent 4 years in London and returned 3 years ago, so I'm beginning my 4th year back.
And how long have you been a teacher?
I started teaching after I graduated from college. I did a year of graduate work. I taught at the Beirut College for Women in Beirut, Lebanon. I taught overseas. My husband and I lived overseas in the Middle East for about 20 years. He was in the Foreign Service. And on and off between raising 5 children, I taught whenever I had the opportunity.
Now, specifically directing your attention to the fall of 1985 to the spring of 1986, you were then teaching at PDS, correct?
I was. Mhm.
And did you have a class in which you had Erik Menendez as one of your students?
Yes, I did. He was in my 9th grade Bible class.
Now, tell us what kind of a class the 9th grade Bible class is.
I should preface by saying that religion is a year of religion is a requirement at our school. We are not a religious school. We are a secular school, but it is regarded as important. And kids have the option of taking Bible in 9th or 10th grade or electives as juniors or seniors. The Bible course was described as Bible as a basis of Western civilization, and it was a way of looking at the Judeo-Christian tradition.
Now, this was
Yeah, the mic, Karen, maybe I see in the chat, she needs a pop filter on that mic. I know. I feel like every single witness, they're either too quiet or they're so close and you can hear every single breath that they take. And every time they say anything with a T or a P, it's like an explosion in your ear. That's just one of those things. That's tech in the 90s, courtroom tech in the 90s was not the best, but at least we've got video and audio that we can actually come together and watch. And also I know that the subjects that we are talking about here are very, very sensitive. And so for those of you in chat that have had experiences of your own, I always want to say at some point, at least, we haven't gotten into too much that's really graphic today. But general trigger warning, if things get difficult for you as we're watching this, there is no need to sacrifice your mental health to be here and watch this specific testimony. So make sure to prioritize that if you do need to. Otherwise, I love the fact that the chat is so supportive of folks that are talking about their own experiences and stuff like that. So I am very, very grateful to see all of that. But just a general sort of PSA that if things do get difficult for you, feel free to take a step back and walk outside, you know, cuddle your pet or something, you know, do something that helps to make you feel a little bit better once again. So just want to say that.
Was a year-long course
Year-long.
that you taught, and how many times a week did you meet?
We met 4 times a week.
And that was for how long a day?
Well, it varies from one day to the other. Our schedule is very hard to understand, but let's say average 50-minute periods.
Okay. And about how many other children were in the 9th grade Bible class that we're speaking of?
In that section, I'd guess 15 or 16.
Now, can you tell us, Mrs. Stoltzfus, based on your contact with Erik during, I'm sorry. Mrs. Abramson can't hear me. Can you tell us, based on your contact with Erik during the course of this year, whether he was mature for his age?
He would have been 15 and something,
Right.
I think. Immature compared to the others.
Okay. And is there anything in particular about his behavior in class with respect to you that makes you tell us that he was immature compared to the other children?
Some of the behavior, sort of clowning, which some kids do, but is not necessarily seen as mature behavior. We met with the building in which our class met is an old building, and we met in the dining room of the building. It was not like a regular classroom, and it had a big table, and we all sat around the table, and Erik always sat right there. For whatever reason, he seemed to want to feel secure.
Okay, when you say right there, do you mean next to you?
Right next to me. Mhm.
Okay, and did that to you mean that Erik felt some need to be near you?
Sustained.
Okay, what based on your years of teaching experience, is there a particular phenomenon that is at work when a child seeks to be near a teacher, to be close to a teacher?
Sustained.
I'm going to show you, Mrs. Stoltzfus, a package of documents that's been previously marked as Exhibit 197, which prosecution has had for a number of days. May I approach on it?
Yes.
Thank you. Just show you a package of documents. Would you take a look at those and see if you recognize those papers?
These are comments written by various teachers. I see a lot of middle school reports.
There are some tabs.
Oh, all right.
on the side of the paper. Would you look at those tabs and see whether or not those tabs show your
Yes, comment from from probably October of 85, comment from November of 85, comment from March probably of 86. And sir.
last comment appears to be from June of 1986?
Yes, I'm just catching up with March and April. The last one would be June of 1986.
Now, what are these comments that we've been referring to?
Every quarter, and in this case, I notice there are 5, which we no longer have to do. Thank goodness, only 4. At the time that you give grades, you also write a comment assessing the student, trying to give a verbal picture of where the student is at that point, making suggestions for improvement or praise for success.
And have you had a chance to review your comments about Erik that you wrote in connection with the Bible class?
Yes, I have.
Now, Mrs. Stoltzfus, did you notice any learning problems that Erik had early on in your contact with him in 1985?
I recall saying in that very first comment in October that I noticed he seemed to get flustered taking written tests, and that it was my observation that he had a problem literally with the physical act of writing. It's a fancy term for it, is dysgraphia. He would have had to have been tested for that, which as far as I know, he never was. But that his writing was quite bad, and it was literally painful to do it. And I concluded that perhaps one of the reasons that he particularly got disturbed at the time of taking a test was because of that.
Your Honor, I move to strike everything after I conclude this being a speculation and conclusion on Menendez.
Right, that portion of the answer will be stricken, the rest will remain.
Now,
The problem is that was such a long answer that will the jury actually disregard everything that she said after, I had concluded? I don't know. I mean, I'm left with the impression that Erik may very well have had an actual condition that made it hard for him to physically write. I wrote down dysgraphia. The problem is she's not an expert, so it is proper for them to strike that portion of her testimony because she's not qualified to testify as an expert and to diagnose anyone. So and she did say he never got a diagnosis for it. She probably could say, I've seen a lot of kids in the past that have had something like this, or I've seen a number of kids in the past that were diagnosed with dysgraphia, and based on what I saw, he looked almost exactly like these other kids, like that, maybe, but it probably would still get struck. Let's be honest, because it's still kind of giving an opinion on something that she's not qualified as an expert to do so.
let's get back to this, the term that you said, dysgraphia.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that is literally a difficulty in putting your thoughts to paper.
Right, and in actually physically writing on the page.
Okay. Was there a difference between the skills that you observed Erik using in class orally and his written skills?
Very striking difference. He was excellent in oral discussion. He had a lot of wonderful insights, and he expressed himself very well.
Okay, now you mentioned that your first comment was that he became flustered on tests. Can you tell us what you meant by flustered?
Well, to me, flustered is sort of sweating a lot and scratching things out and having trouble concentrating while others are moving right along and perhaps not even finishing.
Did it appear to you that Erik was a child with a high anxiety level with respect to his performance in school?
I would say he was very anxious.
Okay. And is there anything else about his behavior in class that makes you conclude that he was anxious? For example, his seating himself.
That would certainly be an example of it, because a girl might do that, but it's unusual for a guy. And the security, if you're taking a test and you're anxious, would certainly lead to that. Being very worried about whether the assignment had been done right, taking a test and saying, am I doing this right? And say, we can't talk about that now, that kind of thing.
He would say that. He would say, am I doing this right during tests?
Mm-hmm.
Is that yes?
Yes.
Okay. And of course, that's something that students are taught they're not allowed to do during the course of the test.
They try from time to time, but he was much more chronic about it.
Okay. Now, Mrs. Stoltzfus, did Erik seem to you to be a happy child or a sad child?
Erik struck me as a very sad kid. I never saw what I would call a sense of joy about him.
All right. You mentioned earlier that he was he used to clown around.
Mhm.
How do you reconcile your description of him as a sad kid with his clowning around behavior?
I would conclude that the clowning around was to get attention, to show that he was one of the kids, when in fact he
It's going to get struck.
had,
Speculation.
as far as I could see, no particular buddies in that classroom.
Oh,
He didn't
I'm surprised.
appear to have.
I am very surprised that there was no objection to that statement and a request to strike it for speculation, because she just testified to, you know, what was going on in Erik's brain when he would clown around. So maybe they didn't care on that one, but they usually are very quick to jump on objections about anything like that. So I don't know, maybe they missed it, or maybe they didn't care. I don't know.
Friends that he would talk to or spend time with during class? No particular friend?
No,
Did he seem to be lonely?
There it is.
he was a very alone kind of person, yes.
Now, Mrs. Stoltzfus, have you had a chance to review at some prior time the comments that were written about Erik by other teachers at Princeton Day School?
At the time that I looked over my old ones, I also looked at comments written by my son and by other teachers. My son also teaches there. And I was struck by how often teachers referred to his anxiety.
Did there appear to be any pressure on Erik with respect to learning a performance in school?
Yes,
And do you what do you mean when you say there appeared to be pressure?
he would get very uptight at the time of a test and over deadlines.
Were you aware, Mrs. Stoltzfus, that Erik had an older brother named Lyle who attended PBS?
Yes, I was.
And are you aware of how Lyle did as a student as compared to Erik?
Sustained.
What was there discussion among the teachers at PDS about the two Menendez boys and their level of achievement?
Sustained.
Did Erik appear to be under any pressure because of his following in his brother's footsteps?
I would say absolutely.
Okay, and was his brother a better student or a worse student?
I never taught Lyle. The conventional wisdom was
Hearsay or speculation.
Was there any discussion among the teachers at school about Lyle's academic achievement? Was that a matter that was discussed?
at faculty meetings, one discusses students, and Lyle was regarded as the more achieving student.
Sustained. The answer is true.
Was there any source of pressure on Erik in terms of performing at school, aside from, were sports a source of pressure?
He played on the tennis team in the spring. He certainly put a lot of time into practice. One of my comments, I warned him because he had had a marvelous second quarter, and then the third quarter began to slide away a little bit. And I said, you know, be sure you don't let the pressures of the tennis season get in the way of your academics.
Was that in your comment?
That was in my comment,
In
yes.
April of 1986?
That's correct.
And was that a comment that was written actually before the tennis season even began?
Probably on the verge of it.
Okay, did,
Probably would have started.
and did in fact once the tennis season started, did Erik appear to have some added pressure on him because of his involvement in tennis?
His performance diminished.
Did Erik ever mention to you Lyle's superior performance or reputation as an achiever in school?
Erik made it very clear that he idolized his older brother, that this was somebody who was an academic wonder and an athlete of the first order.
Did Erik indicate to you that he wanted to emulate his older brother?
It was very clear that he would love to achieve as his brother had.
Mrs. Stoltzfus, did there come a time in the spring of 1986, probably around the time during tennis season, where you caught Erik copying from another child's work?
Yes.
Uh-oh.
And how did you happen to find out that Erik copied from another child's work?
I had given a rather long written assignment, actually to outline the book of Acts, and they had been turned in, and I was reading them, read Erik's, thought this looks good, put it aside, read some others, read another one, and realized that I was seeing words again that I had read earlier. So then I set them out side by side, and it was clear that one was a copy of the other, and the other student was a straight one student, and Erik had been floundering. It was clear that he had copied from the other student.
And a straight one student is somebody that gets the highest.
That's
grade.
right. We have a very bizarre grading system.
Okay, so straight one would be like an A.
Beyond.
Now, after you made this discovery, did you then talk to Erik?
Yes, I did.
And
I called him aside, a little room we had up in Colross. This building that we taught in, which was not the main building, I'm sorry.
Expect on cross-examination for the prosecution to come in and like really hammer this cheating thing. Because when we've seen teachers and school nurses and stuff testify to how, Erik or Lyle would Lyle would leave class to go to the nurse's office to complain about headaches and stomach aches and things like that. The prosecution then on cross-examination came and sort of spun that into, he was leaving class and he was struggling in school. So, he would get up and just leave class because, he said he wasn't feeling well. Kind of like he's looking for an excuse. These kids are lazy. These kids are entitled. These kids are spoiled, and their parents gave them everything they could ever want, and it was never enough. And they just didn't even understand how good they had it. Is basically the way that the prosecution sort of puts that. So be ready for that on cross-examination about this testimony, this part right here. It's going to be hammered in on cross, I think.
And I showed the papers and I said, you cheated. You copied this. How do you explain this? I may not have attacked like that. I don't exactly remember, but I said, how do you explain the similarity between these two? And his initial reaction was, nothing. And then I said, you had to have copied this. And he began to cry.
you say he began to cry.
Yes.
A few tears?
No, he really cried.
Was the crying that you saw unusual behavior for a 15 or 16-year-old ninth grader, even one who's just been confronted with a paper they copied?
You can ask a question.
I have rarely seen a boy of that age cry over anything.
And did Erik tell you anything about why he copied the other child's paper?
He was desperate to get it done.
Now, Meaning he had to get it in by a
Had to be in by a certain time, and I had made that very clear, and because I was away at the time.
Mrs. Stoltzfus, you had at that point taught Erik since the fall, correct? Is that yes?
Yes, that is correct.
And Erik, could Erik have gotten more time to complete the assignment if he had asked you?
Yes, he could have. I often gave extensions. He didn't seem to trust what the other kids knew about me, that I would give an extension.
Overall, the answer is stand.
Was this copying of the other child's paper a particularly clever or sophisticated way of?
Doomed to failure. Totally unsophisticated.
Did Erik ever have a problem following instructions that you noticed?
Yes, often, and this was one of the things that would get him into trouble on a test. He would misread the directions, or on a creative kind of assignment. I gave a lot of creative type of assignments. He would either misread the directions or not follow them, even if sometimes one had gone over them in class.
And did you, in fact, mention these problems in following instructions in the comments?
Yes, I did.
Let me ask you, Mrs. Stoltzfus, did anyone ever, either Mr. Menendez or Mrs. Menendez ever contact you regarding any of your suggestions in the comments?
No, I never heard from them at all.
And these comments, again, were sent out to parents?
That's correct.
Getting back for a moment to the copying incident where Erik copied the other child's paper, was that essentially copying the other paper word for word?
Almost word for word, especially as one got closer to the end, except that then he was going so fast. You could see he was under pressure from the handwriting, from the speed, and certain things were dropped out. That there was no attempt to change the structure or the wording, which is why I say it was not a very sophisticated effort.
Now, you indicated that Erik had certain learning disabilities that you observed in class. What were your suggestions that you offered in terms of dealing with these learning disabilities?
I suggested, I commented on the problem with the writing very early on. I talked about his working on study strategies, both at the beginning of the year and the end of the year. It seemed to me that his erratic performance showed very erratic kind of preparation, that he was not familiar with, or at least not doing the kind of organization and separating important things from minor things that you do as you prepare for a test or as you take notes in class. Kids who have problems with dysgraphia often don't take very many notes because, again, the physical act of writing is so painful.
Is there a procedure at Princeton Day School when a child does something like Erik did, copied another child's paper?
Yes, it was a primary offense, and he went before the judiciary.
Okay. And is that kind of like a committee of people that meet and decide what should happen?
It's a committee composed of elected members of the student body representing each grade, and also has faculty members, both permanent and rotating, on it.
And does the child just come by himself to the Judiciary Committee, or can there be a parent there?
The advisor accompanies the child, and the parent can go if the parent wishes.
Okay. And were you, in fact, present there at the Judiciary Committee when they met to discuss Erik's copying the other child's paper?
I was present for the first part of the hearing because I was bringing the charge.
All right. And was Erik there?
Erik was there.
And was Erik's mother there?
Erik's mother was there.
Did Erik's mother make any statements to the committee about what her son had done?
After I had brought the charge, she did make a statement. She said, you have to understand that we were moving and Erik was very busy.
And is there a particular reason why Mrs. Menendez's explanations to the Judiciary Committee is something that you remember today? Mrs. Menendez's, how many Judiciary Committee sessions or meetings had you participated in?
I had been a member as a rotating faculty member for quite a few years, and that particular year, with two other faculty members, I was one of three heads. The head had died in the fall. But for this case, of course, I couldn't sit on it. I had seen a lot of parents in not a lot of serious cases.
You've answered the question.
Okay.
The next question, please.
And was there anything different about Mrs. Menendez's reaction as opposed to the other parents?
Yes.
Objection sustained. The answer is stricken.
Did Mrs. Menendez comment on the wrongfulness of what Erik had done?
Not at all.
She never said he did wrong?
She never said he did wrong.
Did it appear that she had any perception that this was wrong behavior on the part of her son?
Objection calls for speculation on part of the witness.
Sustained.
At the time Mrs. Menendez appeared and said, "You have to understand we were moving, Erik was busy," was he there?
Yes, he was.
Okay. And Erik remained silent, correct?
Remained silent.
May I just have a moment, Your Honor?
Sorry.
Mrs. Stoltzfus, you indicated that you first confronted Erik about this behavior. Did Erik admit or acknowledge that he knew that what he had done was wrong?
He was scared. He was terrified. He didn't discuss that.
Okay. He didn't tell you what he was scared and terrified of?
No.
One last question, Mrs. Stoltzfus. Did you like Erik as a student in your class?
I was very fond of Erik. Very fond of Erik.
Thank you very much. I have nothing further.
Cross-examination.
There it goes.
Ma'am, in regards to this incident you've just testified about, I believe you indicated that when you confronted Erik Menendez with what your suspicions were, that he cried. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Did you feel sorry for him when he cried?
Is she getting at that this was a move of manipulation that Erik would do? He would get in trouble, and so he'd start crying to get out of being in trouble. Because there's a lot of testimony that he used to cry a lot as a kid, and that his parents disliked his crying quite a bit. But that question makes me think that the prosecution is saying it's not just that he cried a lot. He cried with this very particular intention. I don't think that's something that would be likely if he grew up in the household that he grew up in. Because that kind of behavior would have been conditioned very strongly away from him. If he was crying, it probably was because he couldn't help it.
Felt compassion, yes.
In spite of the fact that you felt compassion, you still reported the incident. Is that correct?
Of course.
Okay, why?
Why? Because one always does.
And why?
Because it was a violation of the honor code.
Are the students at Princeton Day School supposed to abide by the honor code?
Yes.
And are they supposed to be held responsible for their actions in violation of the honor code?
Yes, they are.
I believe that you've indicated in the records that you have in front of you that there are 5 separate notations that you made throughout.
In this particular year.
Yes, and that was the only year that you taught Erik Menendez.
That's
correct?
right.
In the first 3 of those reports, it appears that the reports are favorable. Is that
The first.
Sustained. Rephrase the question.
Are those reports favorable, the first 3?
I'm going to object because we made more favorable.
Okay, would you consider those reports to be positive reports rather than negative reports?
May I just say, the very first one was written probably less than 6 weeks into the school year when you do not know a student very well. It is not my style as a teacher to be negative about students whom I don't know very well, although I do try to identify a potential problem which I saw in his handwriting. The second comment was very positive. He'd had a fine quarter. The third comment, I may be out of whack on these, or perhaps it was first, second, third comment was the one that he got a 2. The second time he got a grade, he got a 3, he got a 2. And that was very strong. He had done good work on a test. He knew he was organized and prepared, and that was the one time he really came through like that.
Now, the test that he did well on in reference to this, I think you said second quarter, was that a test that was taken in class?
Yes, it was.
Were all of the tests taken in class, or were any of them the kind where you can take them home?
No, in those days they were taken in class.
And so the third report was a positive report, correct?
On the basis of 5, yes,
All right. And then
I think.
In April, there were 2 reports after the third one.
That's right. There were 2 reports in the second semester
Okay, and one was in April and one was in June.
in June.
I believe that in the notes and also in your testimony, those reports coincided with the advent of the tennis season.
The first of those 2 would have been at the very beginning of the tennis season. It
And
was
you-
probably 2 weeks after spring break.
And you were aware, were you not, that Erik Menendez was very much involved in tennis at that age?
Oh, yes,
Did he play on the tennis team at the school?
yes.
I believe you indicated that he displayed clowning behavior in class. Was that behavior disruptive to the classroom in any way?
He was not one to carry on if you said, cut it out.
The incident that you've referred to in which he copied another student's paper, did that also occur after the April or after the onset of the last?
It was probably at the beginning of May.
Okay, so it was after the onset of tennis season as well.
Is that yes?
Yes, sorry, I'm sorry.
Now, the 5 notations that you have in regard to his studies in your Bible class, would it be normal for any of those to contain a reference to this incident that you've testified to with the copying?
I referred to it, but I alluded to it.
Okay, so it's not very clear then.
Well, it's very clear to me, and I think it was very clear to him and very clear to his parents.
Okay, but not to just someone who isn't familiar with the incident.
Yes.
Okay. So in the first 3, or your first part of the contact with Erik Menendez, he did do good work. Is that correct?
He was up and down.
But he was capable.
He was capable of good work. There were certain things that got in the way.
Thank you very much.
Any redirect?
Yes, Dr. Mrs. Stoltzfus, what do you think was the moral lesson of Mrs. Menendez's statement to the Judiciary Committee in the presence of her son?
There was no moral lesson at all.
She wasn't a good example to her son.
It calls for conclusion and is beyond scope.
Objection sustained.
I'm going to ask you to look at your comments, specifically your first one, which was in October of 1985. Okay, in that, and this was one that you said that you wrote early on in your contact with Erik, and you were trying not
That's
to.
right. It's written in October, and it's probably fairly early in October.
Okay, and you also mentioned in that comment that the physical act of writing seemed to be a struggle for Erik.
That's right.
Okay, and that also that it may get in the way of his dealing on paper with material that he may understand intellectually.
Correct.
And this is also the comment in which you said that we need to address this before the year advances much further.
That's right.
Okay, and I believe you testified that there was no response to this.
There was no response. We would have had parent conferences shortly thereafter, or we would have had them there before. I never was asked to have a conference.
Now, the second comment that Mrs. Bozanich mentioned, that's dated November of 1985.
Yes, it is.
All right. And in that comment, you mentioned Eric's having charted an erratic course that fall.
That's right.
And by that, did you mean
Up and down, up and down. He had, in the final weeks, according to my comment, done better work. And so therefore, I was pleased that things were moving up rather than down at that point.
All right. And the third comment is in February of 1986.
That would be at the end of the second semester.
Okay. And in that comment,
I'm not finding it. Here it is.
here it is. Okay. Did you mention Eric's being flustered and that interfering with his work?
I did. He had done quite well during that particular quarter. He, I note, scored, he fell apart on the exam, which was too bad. It was not indicative of the kind of work he'd done during the quarter, but characteristic of his getting flustered for a big event.
And then there's another comment in, I believe, April of 1986.
Correct?
And this was the comment in which you mentioned the prospective pressure in the spring because of tennis.
He was beginning to slide. I talk about his having seemed to have lost the commitment to excellence that he had before, and warned him to try to stay focused on academics, even though there was a lot on his plate.
Okay. And in the final comment in June of 1986, you mentioned that it had been a difficult quarter for him. Is that the reference to the copying incident?
Do you want me to read the sentence that refers to it?
Yes.
The act's outline proved to be a learning experience in unexpected ways, perhaps the most valuable one of the year if you truly profit from it.
And did that comment also again mention Erik getting flustered under pressure and misreading directions to his detriment?
Yes, he had done very badly on the final exam. And one of the reasons was misreading the directions for a pretty straightforward question, which he should perfectly well have been able to answer.
Did Erik's mother and your contacts with him, Mrs. Stoltzfus, seem to care about his learning and his learning problems?
Could I just answer about my contacts with her?
Why don't you rephrase the question and then maybe you can, depending on what the question is.
Okay.
You met with Mrs. Menendez before the Judiciary, correct?
Yes.
And you also, at that time that you met with her before the Judiciary, had sent home a number of these comments with suggestions and.
That's correct.
Okay. And had you had any contact with her in addition to the Judiciary incident and the normal?
Mrs. Menendez never asked me or commented on anything about Erik's academics.
Would it be correct to say that she did not appear to be concerned about his academics based on her failure to contact you?
Sustain.
She never contacted you?
She never contacted me.
Overrule the answer will stand.
Did you see Mrs. Menendez at tennis matches in connection with the school?
Only once, and that was an in-house kind of thing. That was probably before Erik was in the upper school, quite a bit before.
All right. Thank you very much. I have nothing further.
Anything else? All right, thank you. You may step down. Your excuse.
Thank you.
Your next witness? Sure.
Barbara Zussman, Zussman.
Is that Dr. Zussman?
Dr. Hayes.
What kind of a doctorate do you hold?
It's an academic doctorate in EDD
And are you presently retired?
from full-time teaching, yes.
Okay, so you were a teacher in the past?
Mhm.
How long were you a teacher?
Altogether about 28 years.
All right. And did you teach for some time at Beverly Hills High School?
Yes, I did.
When did you teach at Beverly Hills High School?
Until 3 years ago, I taught there for 8 years total.
All right. And what particular subject or subjects did you teach?
English.
And I'm going to ask you to remember back to 1988 to 1989. You were teaching at Beverly Hills High School then.
Yes, I was.
And did you teach a class in which Erik Menendez was one of your students?
Yes.
What class was that?
It was a 12th grade English class.
And was this, what type of an English class? Did it have a theme?
Yes, the theme was, the literature was Shakespeare.
And was this an elective class that the students would choose?
Well, it was a required that they take English, but the content of the literature was the elective part.
And this was a class of 12th graders, correct?
Yes, yes.
And it was a class that began in September of 1988 and ended in June of 1989.
That's right.
So the first time you remember meeting Erik Menendez was in your class in the fall of 1988.
Yes.
Did there come a time, Mrs. Zussman, when you had a conference or a meeting with Erik's parents?
I had two meetings. The first one with both parents, I believe it was right before the Christmas vacation.
And was there something unusual about the timing of that meeting that you had with Erik's parents?
Well, from a teacher's point of view, yes, because it was a Friday before a vacation, and teachers are not normally expected to stay for any reason on Friday, and certainly not before a Christmas vacation. But the request had been made for the conference through the counselor, and I thought I might as well get it over with rather than have it hang over vacation. So I said, yes, I'd keep the appointment.
Okay, and did you in fact have an appointment with Erik's parents sometime in December?
On that Friday afternoon, whenever it was, yes.
Okay,
Yes.
how long did the meeting last?
I would say it was about an hour, as well as I can remember now.
All right, now you said that both of the parents attended. Did one of them do most of the talking?
I would say all of the talking was Mr. Menendez.
And can you tell us, Dr. Zussman, based on your contact with Mr. Menendez at that particular meeting, first of all, what did they want to talk about?
About how Erik was doing in my class, basically.
And was there also any discussion about recommendations for college?
Yes, I raised that because Erik had brought me requests to write recommendations to colleges for him. And I pointed out that it was unusual to ask a 12th grade teacher to do that because I had only known him so few weeks, that it was more the practice to ask an 11th grade teacher to do it.
Okay. What were your impressions of Jose Menendez based on the meeting that you had with him?
I thought he had a very definite sense of who he was. I thought he was very condescending. He didn't seem to have a very high opinion of teachers, especially women teachers.
Mm.
What made you feel that he didn't have a very high opinion of teachers in general and women teachers in particular?
Just his general attitude. I couldn't say he said anything. It was just the manner in which he spoke to me.
What about Mr. Menendez's attitude towards his son? Did he express any expectations of his son during this meeting that you had with him?
That he expected him to do well, yes.
Okay. And did you have any, were his expectations of his son, in your opinion, realistic?
No, I don't think they were.
Okay. Could you tell us about Erik as a student? What type of student was he?
Earlier in the year, I thought he was suffering from a typical case of senioritis, which means that there are frequent absences and work isn't handed in very often or very well, which is common with many seniors. It was very difficult to get work completed in class from him. Written assignments were rarely completed if they were to be completed in class. But homework assignments eventually I would get from him, and the caliber of those assignments was much higher than anything he produced in class.
And did there appear to you to be some difficulty, some learning difficulty on Erik's part?
It didn't occur to me until much later in the second semester that Erik had a reading problem. And I really only noticed it because it's typical of seniors especially to be able to compensate and to cover up for reading difficulties. There are all kinds of techniques that kids use to do that. But because it was a Shakespeare class, we did a lot of oral work, and quite a bit of it was sight reading. And Erik liked to take part because he enjoyed acting. And I noticed as he was reading that he was substituting words for what was actually in the text, using the right beginning sounds, but making up another word as he was reading. And that alerted me to the fact that he was having reading problems.
Okay. Is there a particular name for the reading problem that you observed with Erik?
Well, some people call it dyslexia.
Would the substitution of words that you observed occur for any words, or just very difficult words? Or can you tell us?
Oh, difficult words of several syllables.
Now,
I wouldn't say he was a completely handicapped student. He wasn't. He could function. But I would imagine that this reading problem would slow him down somewhat.
okay. Did it appear that Erik had to struggle to get meaning from the printed page?
Objection calls for speculation. Overall, you can answer the question.
In the sense that it might be new material and unfamiliar material, but as I say, because of his experience and the fact that he was a capable young man in many ways, he probably could make a guess at the real meaning as he was reading, but it would slow him down a bit, I think.
Okay. Now, are students with reading problems such as Erik, able to compensate for those reading problems in certain ways?
Oh, I think they do, very definitely.
And in what ways would a student with Erik's reading problems compensate?
Well, there are different ways. I think one of the ways Erik did it was by not hiding himself. Many kids who have that problem would shrink back and not be noticed, whereas Erik was anxious to participate. He liked reading aloud. He liked acting. And as I say, the fact that he would substitute words that might make sense or might make meaning was one of the ways he did it.
Okay. Did you ever have a discussion with either of Erik's parents about his difficulties with reading?
Towards the end of the second semester, Mrs. Menendez asked for a conference, and she came by herself that time. And I raised this point. I said I had the feeling that Erik had reading problems, that I hadn't noticed it as noticeably, but towards the end of the year, I felt strongly that there was a problem. And she said, oh, yes, we know that. We had him tested when he was younger, and we were told that Erik was dyslexic. And I said at the time, I wish you had said something when enrolling Erik in the school. We might have been able to help him. But I really don't think so, because if it isn't handled early, by 12th grade, there's probably not much that a school could do anyway.
Okay. In other words, this reading dyslexia is something that you need intervention in remedial classes at a very early age.
Yes, I would say so.
In what way, based on the year that you had Erik in your English class, do you think that his father's expectations of him were unrealistic?
I don't think Erik's interests were mainly academic. I think he preferred, he liked acting. I think he liked athletic activities. He did not enjoy writing. His written assignments were not well done. I had occasion to talk to a tutor, and I asked her if she wouldn't write stuff for Erik because I could see the difference between his home assignments and the stuff that he did for me in class, because I couldn't help him if I didn't see his own work. And she became somewhat angry with me and said I was trying to take her tutoring job away. So I soft-pedaled on that.
What about memorizing? Would Erik use memorizing as a coping mechanism or a way to deal with this particular learning problem?
I think this is one of the compensation things I think he did. In his drama class, with which I had nothing to do, he was asked to memorize a Shakespearean soliloquy of some kind. And he asked me one day if I would hear him rehearse it, which I did. And he had chosen a very difficult soliloquy from Richard II, a very difficult one to understand, and I think a difficult one for an actor to perform. And I asked him why he chose to memorize it, which he'd done quite well. Mm-hmm. And he said, because you told the class it was difficult.
One last question. Was there a difference, Dr. Zussman?
It's interesting because it suggests that it's like he was being told for so long, by his parents and by not by teachers necessarily, but by his academic performance. It's like he keeps getting these signals that he's not good enough, that he's not smart enough, he's not academically successful enough, and so he wants to take that challenging portion and take that on, maybe not necessarily to prove to anyone else other than to himself that he can do it. That says something about him.
And between Mrs. Menendez and how she appeared and carried herself during the first meeting that you had with her and her husband, and the second meeting that she alone attended.
The first meeting, both parents were extremely well dressed, Mr. Menendez particularly, but she looked equally well groomed. The second meeting, she was not as well dressed. Her hair was not as, she just didn't look the same person, but maybe because it was the summer and she was more casual, but she did look more dowdy, if that's the right word to use, the second time.
Did she act in any different way? Did she seem depressed?
Well, she didn't say anything really the first time. She was very quiet, and she was very quiet and low-key. The second time, she just said, I've come in to see how Erik has been doing.
And when was this second meeting?
The date I can't remember, but it must have been quite late in the semester, probably around May.
That was in May of Erik's senior year?
Of his senior year, yes.
That's May of 1989.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Your Honor. I have nothing further at this time.
Cross-examination.
Thank you.
Dr. Zussman, you indicated that you actually spoke to a tutor that Erik had.
On the telephone, yes.
On the telephone. How did you find out that he had this tutor?
Mr. Menendez told me he did.
And when did you talk to Mr. Menendez about the tutor?
At the time of our first interview. I mentioned my feeling that I could help Erik better if I were looking at his own work, not work that was done by a tutor. So he gave me the tutor's telephone number. Mr. Menendez did.
So Mr. and Mrs. Menendez had tried to assist their son by getting a tutor for him.
Objection calls for speculation.
Yeah. Yeah.
You had
that's
indicated, ma'am,
definitely-
that
because it's like you can't take the fact that he has a tutor to then conclude, oh well, Kitty and Jose obviously were so concerned about their son's academic performance that they got him all this help. They got him a private tutor. So that's definitely that was a correct sustained objection on that comment.
you thought that Erik Menendez had some problems reading, for example.
Yes.
This tutor that you talked to, what sorts of things would the tutor be involved with Erik Menendez?
Objection calls for either hearsay or speculation.
Objection sustained.
This conversation that you had with the tutor, did you find out what areas were covered with Erik Menendez by the tutor?
Objection, hearsay.
This has to do with the conversation elicited by Ms. Morrissey in her direct examination?
Yes.
Overall.
You may answer me.
I mostly talked to her about the writing that she was helping him with, which I understood was what she was doing as far as English was concerned.
Do you recall who the tutor was?
No.
And you asked the tutor not to help Erik as it related to your class?
No, I didn't ask her not to help him. I wanted her not to. It seemed to me that she was rewriting much of what he did. And I felt she should help him, but not write material for him, or I wouldn't know what he could do.
Now, did you have occasion to examine the grades that Erik Menendez had gotten from Calabasas High School?
Yes, I did.
Did he get good grades in English from Calabasas High School?
So far as I remember, he did in 9th and 10th grade, but not in 11th.
Was it your understanding that Erik Menendez was a new student at Beverly Hills High School?
He was new in the 12th grade, yes.
So he came for his 12th grade year?
Yes.
And that was the first time you had ever taught Erik Menendez?
Yes.
And you taught him for that whole year?
Yes.
Now, there was a point at which you indicated that Erik Menendez wanted you to write a recommendation for him. He's applying to colleges.
Yes.
And did you write recommendations for him?
I did write them, but I explained to Mr. and Mrs. Menendez that they would have to be very general because I hadn't known him more than a few weeks when these recommendations were due, and I had to say that in the letters that I wrote.
Now, Beverly Hills High School is a fairly prestigious high school, I take it.
I think so.
It is highly regarded as a high school?
I think so.
Do you know how it's rated?
I mean, that's where Cher went. I'm talking about the movie Clueless. Anyway, I'm cracking myself up.
Rated among other high schools in
We're not going to
California?
object to this, it's irrelevant.
Overall.
I think it's rated very highly compared with many other schools in the country.
Do you recall which colleges you sent out the recommendations, or did you just write a letter to whom it may concern?
I don't remember the colleges I wrote to. Mostly it involved filling in some forms and then attaching a general letter that I probably did, as was my custom, to whom it may concern, and just attach it, the same letter to each college.
Did you learn that Erik Menendez had been accepted to such schools as UC Berkeley and UCLA?
No, I never knew where he was accepted.
And you indicated that you had two meetings with respect to Erik Menendez, the first meeting being with both parents.
Yes.
And the parents had come in and they were interested in how Erik was doing in your class.
Yes.
And you had a meeting of about an hour, I think you indicated.
Yes.
Now, the second meeting in the second semester was with only Mrs. Menendez.
Yes.
And she also wanted to know how Erik was doing at that time.
Yes.
Was that a pleasant meeting for you? Do you recall?
I think it was so neutral. I didn't feel positive or negative. It was just an interview with a parent, and it was fine.
Now, you indicated that Erik Menendez liked to act. Is that correct?
That's the impression I got.
Now, you indicated that he was taking a drama class that you knew of.
Yes.
Are you aware of any awards that Erik Menendez received at Beverly Hills High School for acting or from his drama?
Object, because that assumes the fact not the evidence. People have never been.
All right, the objection overruled. This is a cross-examination.
No, I know of nothing like that.
Now, you did know, based on what he told you, that he was taking drama.
Yes.
In fact, he gave you a performance of his. Is that correct? I think you said Richard II.
Oh, the soliloquy that he rehearsed before me, he also presented to the class as a sort of rehearsal for doing it for drama.
He gave this to the entire English class of yours?
Yeah, I asked him if he would, and he said yes, because it was an extra chance to practice before he was graded by his drama teacher. And the class was impressed because it was a play we'd studied, and he had taken the trouble to memorize this soliloquy.
And how would you rate his performance?
As done by a 12th grader, it was quite good. As a piece of acting, it wasn't
Oh, look at that
superb, but it
smile.
was good for a 12th grade senior.
Look at that smile. He looks like so proud of that. To have her say that about, like, he did very well. Look at that. Like, that is just like that is a he looks so pleased and satisfied with getting that compliment from her.
Thank you. I have nothing further at this time.
Any redirect?
May I have a moment more? Dr. Zussman, would you describe Erik as a personable young man?
Oh, yes.
And he was also sociable in class?
Not really. Where we were doing group work, maybe he was, but I wasn't the kind of teacher that encouraged being sociable when you were supposed to be working.
You indicated that memorization was a way to cover up for reading inadequacies.
Well, one way.
I'm sorry? Objection sustained. Answer stricken.
The soliloquy that Mr. Kuriyama asked you about was one that Erik memorized.
Yes,
correct?
yes.
Now let's go back to the first meeting with Mr. and Mrs. Menendez, the only meeting with Mr. and Mrs. Menendez. How would you describe Mr. Menendez as overbearing?
It's slightly. I think condescending was more the feeling I got.
In the second meeting, Mr. Kuriyama asked you if it was in the second semester. It was actually in May.
Well, that would be towards the end of the second semester, yes.
May is just about the end of the school year, correct?
That's as I remember it, yes, yes.
And generally by May, the end of the school year, there's not much that can be done in terms of a student's performance for the year.
That's true.
Rather late to have a meeting.
Well, it was interesting that the parents of a senior would even bother to come. So the fact that she came twice, it wasn't late. I mean, it was interesting that she came.
Anything else? All right, thank you. You may step down. You're excused.
All right.
Are you ready with your next witness? Or you need a break?
So this is going to be the next witness is Kevin Whalen, who we're actually going to cut it off before. So that is actually all of the testimony that we are going to see for today, because Kevin Whalen's he's going to testify for like about an hour in this session, and then they cut it off. They bring him the next day. So I'd rather chunk that all together, but it's a little bit too long to include in today, because he goes for a bit in the next day. Why is this angle so low? Did I just now notice that? There we go. That's better. Hey, puppers. Don't worry, I'll feed you soon. Indy's been bugging me this whole time because she's hungry. But yeah, so rough. Pretty rough. Like it was bittersweet to see that smile, because you can tell that one little compliment meant a lot to him to get that. And as soon as she stopped talking and the next, question came up from the prosecutor on cross-examination, it was like you could just sort of see that smile kind of slowly fade away again. And it's like brought back to, his current situation. So yeah, today was interesting. Today was interesting. Let's get some questions here before we go, though. Seamus Donahue says, why is this witness's testimony probative to Erik's guilt or non-guilt? I am so sorry I didn't bring this up earlier. This was for Janet Stoltzfus. So the teachers are all to talk about Erik and Lyle's problematic performances in their academic life, right? I mean, especially talking about Princeton Day School. They basically, throughout their academic careers, were struggling. And there were these instances also where the teachers often found out that someone was doing their work for them. Either it was Kitty, or it was a tutor, or it was them straight up plagiarizing off of another classmate. So that is, it goes to the overall home environment, but it also goes to the way in which Kitty and Jose raised them. Overall, for the defense, it fits into their defense that the brothers were raised in an environment that was basically torturous for years and years and years, and that they were basically, like, in a lot of ways psychologically imprisoned, and that they felt that there was no way to get out of the abusive household that they were in except for one way, and this was it, and that's why we're here. And also, yeah, Care Bear in the chat, also the neglect of the parents to treat Erik's learning disabilities. Yes, agreed. Because, you know, there have been numerous teachers that have testified to their opinions or their suspicions that he has some kind of a learning disability, whether that is, problems with physically being able to write or being able to read, dyslexia, things like that. And there's also, someone in the chat also, at least one person mentioned, like, I wonder if he has ADHD. That is also a question that has crossed my mind as well. Kitty also makes me wonder if she had, ADHD also, because she's always late all the time. The house is in complete disarray. She seems very scattered and unfocused herself as well. So I'm wondering if she also had undiagnosed ADHD, which in the 90s, I feel like that was just then a conversation that was starting to happen. And it was typically found in young boys. The idea was that a lot of people had was that this is an affliction for young boys, and it's when they're hyperactive and literally doing somersaults off the walls. That's what that is. But now there's a very, very different understanding of what ADHD is. And so I'm almost wondering, there's a whole list of possibilities for what these family members could have had, or what Erik could have had, what Kitty could have had. And yeah, it's interesting. And yeah, it's very, very inheritable. They tend to run quite heavily in families. Dyslexia also could be something that's related. Like there's a certain cluster of things that could be that could run in a particular family. So anyway, so yeah, that's basically what that all goes to. Debbie Faison Cook, how did she know who plagiarized who? So this is also for the same teacher that was testifying. She had testified that the other student that had the same exact essay was a straight 1 student, basically a straight A student. And so she knew that, like, wasn't a student that was struggling at all. This was like the kid that was like the top of the class. That's typically, I mean, okay, let's be real. There are kids out there that are top of the class because they cheat. Let's be real. But she had indicated that that was not the issue here. She knew basically right away that Erik was the one who had chronically been struggling. So she knew who was the one who copied him. Chris Kress, is there any chance that they can be released from prison or have another trial? I apologize if that's already been discussed. I think someone else already answered this in chat, but basically, yeah, there's a possibility. They have been trying to appeal the verdict many times. There's been most recently there was a new writ that was submitted. That included reference to, or I think it was declaration by Roy Rosseo, who had testified that, in a declaration, yeah, basically said that Jose had abused him, had SA'd him. So there was that. There was also a letter from Erik to his cousin Andy, talking about the abuse that they wanted, that they also included with that. The only problem with that one is that is not likely to, like, the discovery of that letter is not likely to like trigger a new trial because of the fact that that was written by Erik. So he would have had notice that he wrote that to Andrew or Andy. And so the issue is, like, new evidence like that has to be truly new. It has to be something that there's no way that the defense would have known about it, because it's not something that was ever on their radar. It was information that was 100% held by someone else. Yes, it was held by it was in Andy Cano's stuff, apparently. But the fact that Erik was the one that wrote that letter, though, means that he should have had notice of the existence of that letter, because he's the one that wrote it. So anyway, so there are a number of different reasons that people that the defense is trying to appeal, trying to get a new trial, or try to get the verdict vacated, et cetera. Whether or not it's going to, I don't know. I think it's relatively slim. Dater says, if Dr. Kirk Honda, Psychology in Seattle, is really into the ethics of psychologists. If you choose to summarize the trial once we're done, consider having him on as a guest for Dr. Oziel. That would be very interesting. I would need to package the information on Dr. Oziel for him to check out ahead of time. That would be very interesting to see his take on it. Dater also says, can you give us some more ideas? Oh, excuse me. I'm so sorry. I'm not bored. I'm not tired. Sometimes I yawn because I think I just don't breathe properly, especially when I've been talking for a bit. Can you give us some more ideas about what's coming in the close future? If you are, I'm not sure if you mean on Next Witnesses for this series, or if you're talking about other videos that I'm working on. I've been researching quite a bit on the Titanic one. In fact, I probably over-researched on that one. I'm also working on, I decided last minute, working on a video on Colleen Ballinger and some of the legal aspects of that whole thing. So if you're familiar with the YouTuber Colleen Ballinger and the allegations that recently came out about her in the last couple of weeks, that is, yep, there's a lot. And let's see, to close out this poll. So the poll that we had here was, do you think Erik and Lyle were SA'd by their parents? 88% said yes, 11% said no. So that's always interesting to see the disagreement, because it's, sometimes we can get blinded to think that everybody agrees with us one way or another. And there are obviously people that disagree one way or another, which is very, very interesting to me always. I mean, seeing the ways that people come to different conclusions, and their reasoning behind it is always very fascinating to me, whether I agree or disagree with one side or another, because it's I will always be fascinated with how someone arrives at a particular conclusion. It's one of the reasons why I love watching trials and why I love commenting on trials. So, okay, I think that is all of the questions here. Yeah, I think that's everything. That's it. That's all we got for today. Thank you so much for joining me, guys. Thank you to everybody in the chat. Thank you, as always, to the mods for being here and for helping to make sure that the chat flows smoothly. Whether people are agreeing or disagreeing, that they are feeling welcome to be in the chat and to be seen, and to be, you know, that everyone is still being respectful though. Yeah. Thank you to, like I said, thank you to the mods, thank you to the chat, thank you to all the folks that gifted memberships. Very, very kind of all of you. And yeah, I guess I'll see you guys in the next video. See ya.